I froze as my daughter-in-law dumped the steaming plate of food onto the floor right at my wife's feet. The room went silent, but Victoria smiled as if it were the most natural thing in the world. She pointed a manicured finger at the mess on the carpet and ordered my wife to eat it in the middle of the wedding. "Eat it," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "Everyone knows you people are used to eating off the ground anyway." I took one slow step forward. Across the room, her father, Preston Vance, the man who thought he owned the world, shot to his feet. The smile vanished from his face, replaced by a look of sheer primal panic. He didn't know my name, but he recognized the eyes of the man who could turn his empire into dust with a single phone call. Before I tell you how I fired my own family, please like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments if you have ever been disrespected by someone who had no idea who you really were. My name is Marcus Thorne. I am 71 years old. If you saw me on the street, you would see a tall black man with gray hair wearing a suit that went out of style 20 years ago. You would see hands that are rough and scarred from 40 years of working on the docks. You would see a man who walks with a slight limp from a crate falling on his leg in 1985. You would see a nobody. And that is exactly what I want you to see. For the last 10 years, I have lived in a small 2-bedroom house with my wife Beatrice. We drive a Ford sedan that has seen better days. We clip coupons for the grocery store. To our neighbors, we are just a quiet, retired couple getting by on a pension. But looks are the greatest deception of all. Those rough hands built the largest logistics empire on the East Coast. That limp is the only thing I have left from the days before I bought the shipping company that employed me. The suit is old because I don't need clothes to prove my worth. I am the majority shareholder of Thorne Logistics, the parent company that owns the very firm my son's new father-in-law runs. Preston Vance thinks he is a CEO. He thinks he is a king. He has no idea that the man sitting at the back table of his daughter's wedding is the one who signs his checks. We were at the Plaza Hotel in New York City. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen tears. The tables were set with silver cutlery and flowers that probably cost more than my first car. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my son Jamal's life. But from the moment we walked in, I knew it was a mistake. Jamal is 28. He is a good boy, or at least he used to be. He met Victoria Vance a year ago. She is beautiful in the way a diamond is beautiful, cold hard and sharp enough to cut you. She comes from money, or what passes for money these days. New money. Loud money. The kind of money that needs to scream to be heard. My wife Beatrice sat next to me. She was wearing her Sunday best, a navy blue dress she had worn to church for the last 5 years. She looked elegant. She looked regal. She has a grace that no amount of money can buy. But I saw the way the other guests looked at her. I saw the sneers. I saw the whispers behind champagne flutes. They looked at us like we were the help that had accidentally sat down at a table. We were seated at table 19. It was the table furthest from the head table, right next to the swinging doors of the kitchen. Every time a waiter walked out, we got hit with a blast of hot air and the smell of dish soap. It was a deliberate insult. Victoria had planned the seating chart. I knew it. Beatrice knew it. But Beatrice just patted my hand and smiled. "It is okay, Marcus," she whispered. "We are here for Jamal. Let's just get through the night." The dinner service began. Waiters in white gloves placed plates of filet mignon with red wine reduction in front of the guests. The smell was rich and intoxicating. But when the waiter came to our table, he stopped. He looked confused. He checked his list. "I am sorry," he said. "I don't have meals listed for this table. The bride said you would not be eating." Beatrice lowered her head. I felt the anger rising in my chest, a familiar heat that I hadn't felt in years. It was the heat of a sleeping dragon waking up. Before I could speak, a shadow fell over our table. It was Victoria. She was wearing a wedding dress that looked like it cost $50,000. It was white lace tight and flowed out like a princess fantasy. She was holding a plate of food in her hand, a special plate. It was heaped high with steak, potatoes, and asparagus. She stood there glowing under the spotlight. The room went quiet. Everyone wanted to see what the beautiful bride was doing at the loser table. "Oh my goodness," Victoria said, her voice loud and theatrical. "There must be a mistake. The caterers forgot to feed the in-laws." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes were dead. "Don't worry," she said, stepping closer. "I brought you something myself. I know how much this free meal must mean to you. I hear you don't get to eat steak very often in that little shack of yours." Beatrice looked up. Thank you, Victoria, Beatrice said softly. That is very kind of you. Victoria leaned in. She held the plate directly over Beatrice's lap. You know, Victoria said, dropping her voice so only we and the nearby tables could hear. My father was worried about inviting you. He said people like you ruin the aesthetic. He said you look like beggars who wandered in off the street. But I told him no. Dad let them come. Everyone needs a charity case to feel good about themselves. Victoria, I said, my voice low and warning. That is enough. She looked at me and laughed, a high-pitched, cruel sound. Oh, hush, Marcus. You should be grateful. I am letting you sit in the same room as senators and CEOs. You should be on your knees thanking me. And then she did it. She tilted the plate. It wasn't an accident. She didn't trip. She looked right at Beatrice and turned her wrist. The filet mignon, the mashed potatoes, the dark red wine sauce slid off the china. It landed with a wet, sickening slap right on the floor inches from Beatrice's shoes. Sauce splattered onto the hem of her navy blue dress. Beatrice gasped, pulling her feet back. Victoria gasped too, a fake, exaggerated sound of shock. Oops, she said, covering her mouth with her hand. My hand slipped. I guess the plate was just too heavy for me. The music stopped. The entire ballroom turned to look. Preston Vance was sitting at the head table laughing. He was pointing at us, nudging the man next to him. Look at that, he seemed to be saying. The trash is getting taken out. Beatrice, being the saint that she is, immediately reached for a napkin. Oh dear, she said. I made a mess. I should clean it up. She started to bend down. She was going to kneel. She was going to kneel on the floor in her Sunday dress and wipe up the sauce, while her daughter-in-law stood over her like a queen. No, Victoria said sharply. Don't use the napkin. That is Egyptian cotton. It costs more than your outfit. Victoria pointed at the pile of food on the carpet. Just eat it, she said. Beatrice froze halfway to the floor. What did you say? Beatrice whispered. I said eat it, Victoria replied, her voice hard and commanding. It is perfectly good steak. 5-second rule, right? Besides, Jamal told me you people eat with your hands at home anyway. Why pretend you have manners now? Get down there and eat it before it gets cold. I don't want to waste good money on you. My heart stopped beating. The world narrowed down to a single point. The point was Victoria's smiling face. I saw Beatrice trembling. I saw the shame burning her cheeks. She was actually considering it. Not because she wanted to, but because she didn't want to cause a scene at her son's wedding. She was going to sacrifice her dignity to keep the peace. I moved. I didn't move like a 71-year-old man. I moved with the speed of the dock worker who used to catch falling crates before they crushed a man's skull. I reached out and grabbed Beatrice's arm. My grip was iron. I pulled her up. I pulled her back into her chair. Don't you dare, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a thunderclap. I stood up. I unfolded my 6'2" frame. I buttoned my old suit jacket. I straightened my tie. I looked at Victoria. She took a step back. For the first time, the smile faltered. She saw something she hadn't expected. She expected a beaten dog. Instead, she found a wolf. Pick it up, I said to her. Excuse me, Victoria stammered. I pointed at the floor. Pick up the food you dropped, Victoria, and apologize to my wife. The room was deadly silent. You could hear a pin drop. Victoria laughed nervously, looking around for support. Are you crazy? She said. I am the bride. You are nobody. Security, get him out of here. But nobody moved. Across the room at the head table, Preston Vance stood up. He had been laughing a moment ago, but now he was staring at me. He was squinting, trying to focus through the distance and the dim light. I turned my head slowly. I looked across the sea of tables, across the flowers and the candles, and I locked eyes with Preston Vance. I didn't say a word. I just looked at him. I gave him the look I used in the boardroom 10 years ago when I hostilely took over his company's parent corporation. The look that said, I own you. Preston's face went white. He grabbed the tablecloth. He swayed. He recognized the eyes. He didn't know how. He didn't know why Marcus Thorne, the retired dock worker, had the eyes of the mysterious chairman he had only seen in blurred photographs and nightmares. But his gut knew. His survival instinct kicked in. He shot to his feet, knocking his chair over. Victoria, he shouted, his voice cracking with panic. Victoria ignored him. She glared at me. I am not cleaning up anything, she hissed. Jamal, get over here. Your father is making a scene." Jamal ran over from the bar. "My son, the boy I raised to be a man." He looked at the food on the floor. He looked at his mother's stained dress. He looked at his wife's angry face. "Dad, what are you doing?" Jamal whispered. "Sit down. You are embarrassing me." I looked at my son. I looked for a spine. I found none. "She threw food at your mother," I said calmly. "She told her to eat it off the floor." Jamal looked at Victoria. Victoria crossed her arms. "It was an accident, Jamal," she lied. "And he is threatening me." On our wedding day, Jamal looked back at me. "Dad, please, just apologize to her. We can talk about this later. Just apologize so we can cut the cake." "Apologize?" I asked. "You want me to apologize to the woman who treated your mother like a dog?" Jamal looked down. He couldn't meet my gaze. "She is stressed, Dad. Just do it. For me. Please. Don't ruin this." "Preston is watching." I looked at Preston. He was still standing frozen in fear. I looked at the food on the floor. I lifted my foot. I was wearing my heavy work boots polished to a shine. I kicked the pile of steak and potatoes. I kicked it hard, sending it skidding across the expensive carpet, smearing sauce everywhere. "I am not apologizing," I said. I turned to Beatrice. "Stand up, Beatrice." She stood up shaking. "We are leaving," I said. "But Marcus." Beatrice whispered the wedding. "There is no wedding here," I said, my voice ringing out in the silent hall. I looked at Jamal. I looked at Victoria. "This isn't a celebration," I said. "This is a zoo, and we are not the animals in the cage." I took Beatrice's hand. "Let's go, Beatrice. The air in here stinks of cheap perfume and debt." We turned and walked out. We walked past the silent tables. We walked past the stunned guests. Behind me, I heard Victoria screaming, "My dress. He ruined the carpet. Daddy, do something." But Preston didn't do anything. He just watched me go. He watched the way I walked. The limp was gone. The slouch was gone. He watched a king walk out of a room full of jesters. And as the double doors swung shut behind us, I knew one thing. The party was over. But the war had just begun. And tomorrow morning, when the hangover set in, they were going to receive a bill they could never afford to pay. The morning sun was hitting the hydrangeas in my front yard with a golden light that felt almost mocking. It was 7 a.m., and the world was waking up to a beautiful Sunday, but inside my chest there was a storm that had been raging all night. I was on my knees in the dirt wearing my old gardening gloves and a stained t-shirt. This garden was my sanctuary. For 10 years I had tended to these flowers. I pruned the dead leaves, I watered the roots, I coaxed life out of the hard earth. It was honest work, it was quiet work, it was the kind of work that let a man think. Inside the house, Beatrice was asleep. Or at least I hoped she was asleep. I knew she had spent the night crying silently into her pillow. I had held her until the shaking stopped, but the look in her eyes when Victoria dumped that food on the floor was something that doesn't fade with a few hours of rest. It was a scar on her soul. I cut a dead rose from the bush. Thorns. Life is full of thorns. You have to know how to handle them, or you bleed. The sound of an engine roaring down the quiet suburban street broke the silence. It wasn't the mailman. It wasn't a neighbor. It was the aggressive whine of a high-performance engine being driven by someone who didn't care about speed limits. I didn't have to look up to know who it was. A bright red convertible screeched to a halt in front of my driveway. The tires left black skid marks on the pavement. My neighbor's curtains twitched. In this neighborhood, people noticed things like that. The car doors slammed. I stood up slowly, brushing the dirt from my knees. I kept my gardening shears in my hand. Victoria marched up the walkway. She wasn't wearing white today. She was wearing a sharp yellow sundress and oversized sunglasses that covered half her face. But even the dark lenses couldn't hide the rage radiating off her. Trailing behind her was Jamal. My son. He looked tired. He looked hungover. But mostly he looked like a dog being dragged on a leash by a cruel master. I stood my ground by the flower bed. I didn't smile. I didn't welcome them. I just waited. "You," Victoria screamed before she even reached the porch steps. "You have some nerve, old man." She stopped 3 feet away from me. She smelled of stale champagne and expensive perfume. "Good morning to you too, Victoria," I said, my voice calm and level. "I assume you are here to apologize to my wife." "Apologize!" she shrieked. Her voice cracked. It was the sound of a spoiled child who had never been told no in her entire life. "Apologize," she repeated, laughing hysterically. "You ruined my wedding. You made a scene. You walked out in the middle of the reception. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? My father had senators at his table. He had business partners. And his in-laws walked out like trash." She stomped her foot. "And the food," she yelled. "You kicked the food. You kicked grease and red wine sauce all over the carpet. It splattered. It got on the hem of my custom Vera Wang gown." I looked at her. I looked at the vein throbbing in her forehead. "You dumped the food on the floor, Victoria," I said. "You told Beatrice to eat it like a dog." "I was making a point," she spat, "and you turned it into a disaster. My dress is ruined. The venue is charging us a cleaning fee for the carpet, and my father is furious. He said he has never been so disrespected in his life." "Good," I said. Victoria's mouth dropped open. She took off her sunglasses, revealing eyes that were bloodshot and cold. "Good," she whispered. "You think this is funny. You think you can just disrespect the Vance family and get away with it. You are nobody, Marcus. You are a retired dock worker living on pennies. We own this town." She reached into her purse. It was a designer bag that probably cost more than my car. She pulled out a piece of paper. It was crumpled as if she had been squeezing it the whole ride over. She shoved it into my chest. "Take it," she ordered. I looked at the paper. I didn't take it. It fluttered to the ground, landing in the dirt next to my boots. "What is that?" I asked. "It is a bill," she said. I looked down. It was a handwritten invoice on hotel stationery. I could see the numbers scrawled in angry red ink. $50,000. I looked back up at her. $50,000, I repeated. "That covers the damage to my dress," Victoria listed, counting on her fingers, "the cleaning fee for the carpet, and $40,000 for emotional distress and loss of reputation. My father says it is a settlement. If you pay it today, we won't sue you." I looked at Jamal. He was standing behind her, looking at his shoes. He hadn't said a word. "Jamal," I said. He flinched. He looked up at me. His eyes were swimming with guilt, but it was a weak, watery guilt. It wasn't the guilt of a man ready to change. It was the guilt of a man who just wanted the noise to stop. "Do you agree with this, son?" I asked. "Do you think I owe your wife $50,000 because she humiliated your mother?" Jamal shifted his weight. He looked at Victoria. She glared at him, daring him to speak. "Dad," Jamal said, his voice quiet and shaky. "Just look. Beatrice shouldn't have tried to pick it up. It caused a scene." I felt a coldness spread through my chest. It was colder than the winter wind on the docks. "She tried to pick it up because she didn't want to embarrass you," I said. "She swallowed her pride for you." "I know," Jamal said quickly. "I know, Dad, but you have to understand. Preston is really mad. Like really mad. He is talking about cutting me out of the company. He is talking about taking back the apartment." So I asked. So Jamal continued pleading now. "You and Mom have savings, I know you do. You worked all those years, you have the pension. Just pay her, Dad. Please, just write the check so this goes away. $50,000 is a lot, but you can afford it, right? Just do it for me. I can't lose this job. I can't lose this lifestyle." I looked at my son. I looked at the boy I had taught to ride a bike. The boy I had taught to fish. The boy I had taught that a man's word is his bond and that family is sacred. And I realized that boy was gone. He had been eaten alive by the greed and the fear of the world he was so desperate to join. He was willing to bankrupt his parents to save his own comfort. He was willing to let his wife rob us to keep his father-in-law happy. He didn't know about the millions in the bank. He didn't know about the trust funds. He thought $50,000 was everything we had. He thought he was asking me to empty my life savings, and he didn't care. I bent down slowly. My knees cracked. I picked up the paper from the dirt. It was stained with mud now. I looked at the number. 50,000. Victoria smirked. "I knew you would be reasonable," she said. "Make the check out to me. Cash is fine too." I looked at the paper one last time. Then I looked at Victoria. I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a dry, harsh sound, like dry leaves scraping on pavement. "What is so funny?" she snapped. I held the paper up. "You think I'm going to pay you for abusing my wife?" I asked. "You ruined my dress," she screamed. I took the paper in both hands. My gardening gloves were still on. I ripped it. The sound of the tearing paper was loud in the quiet morning air. I ripped it again and again until it was nothing but confetti. I opened my hand and let the pieces fall onto her expensive shoes. "What are you doing?" she shrieked, jumping back. I stepped forward. I still had the gardening shears in my hand. I didn't raise them, but the silver metal glinted in the sun. "You get nothing," I said. "Not a dime. Not a penny." "You will regret this," she yelled. "My father will sue you. He will take this house. He will take your pension. He will leave you on the street." I looked at Jamal. "You heard her, son," I said. "She is threatening to leave your parents homeless, and you are standing there saying nothing." Jamal looked away. "Dad, you are making it worse," he mumbled. "No, Jamal," I said. "I am making it clear." I turned back to Victoria. "You want money?" I asked. "You want payment for your distress?" "Yes," she demanded. "Then tell Preston to come get it," I said. "Tell him to come here. Tell him to stand on my porch and ask me for the money himself. Tell him to look me in the eye and demand payment for the food you threw on the floor." "He will come," Victoria sneered. "And he won't be alone. He will bring his lawyers. Tell him to bring whoever he wants," I said. "Tell him to bring his whole army. But tell him one thing for me." What she asked. "Tell him the price of admission to this property just went up." Victoria stared at me. She didn't understand. She thought I was just a crazy old man ranting. She didn't know I was issuing a declaration of war. She spun around. "You are pathetic," she spat. "Come on, Jamal, let's go. I can't breathe this poor air anymore." She marched back to the car. Jamal lingered for a second. He looked at me. "Dad," he started. "Don't," I said. "Don't call me that. Not today." He flinched as if I had hit him. He turned and ran after his wife. The tail was firmly between his legs. The car roared to life. Victoria revved the engine aggressively. She peeled out, leaving rubber on the road, speeding away toward the city, toward the penthouse, toward the life they thought they owned. I watched them go until the red car was just a speck in the distance. I looked down at the torn pieces of paper in the dirt. $50,000. They wanted $50,000 from a retired dock worker. I took off my gardening gloves. I threw them on the porch. I walked into the house. It was quiet and cool inside. Beatrice was sitting at the kitchen table holding a cup of tea. Her eyes were red. "Did they leave?" she asked softly. "They left," I said, sitting down opposite her. "What did they want, Marcus?" "They wanted to see if we were broken," I said. "And are we?" Beatrice asked, looking at her hands. I reached across the table and covered her hands with mine. My hands were rough, hers were soft. "No, Beatrice," I said. "We are not broken. We are just waking up." I stood up and walked to the hallway closet. I reached to the top shelf behind the winter coats and the old blankets. "What are you doing?" Beatrice asked. I pulled down a heavy steel box. It was a fireproof safe. I carried it to the table. I spun the dial, left, right, left, click. I opened the lid. Inside there was no money, there were no jewels, there was a satellite phone, black, heavy, military grade, and there was a ledger, a black book with the logo of Thorn Logistics embossed on the cover. "Marcus," Beatrice whispered, "you promised you were done. You promised we would just be Marcus and Beatrice, the retired couple." I looked at the phone. I thought about the way Victoria laughed when she dropped the food. I thought about the fear in Jamal's eyes, not fear for us, but fear for his wallet. I thought about Preston Vance sitting in his office thinking he was untouchable. "They broke the peace, Beatrice," I said, picking up the phone. "But Marcus," Beatrice said, fear in her voice, "if you make that call, everything changes. The quiet life is over." "The quiet life ended last night," I said. "When they treated you like an animal, they invited the zookeeper back to work." I powered on the phone. The screen glowed green. I looked at my wife. "Do you trust me?" I asked. "Always," she said. "Then drink your tea," I said. "I have to make a call." I dialed the number. It was a number only 5 people in the world knew. It rang once. "Thorn Logistics Secure Line," a voice answered instantly. "This is the chairman," I said. There was a pause on the other end, a stunned silence. "Mr. Thorn, we haven't heard from you in 10 years. I know," I said, my voice dropping to a low rumble. "But I have a problem with a subsidiary." "Which one, sir?" "Vance Shipping," I said. "I want a full audit. I want the accounts frozen. And I want a file on Preston Vance on my desk in 1 hour." "Understood, sir. Welcome back." I hung up the phone. I looked out the window at my garden. The roses were pruned, the weeds were gone. But now it was time to pull up the roots. The silence in the house after Victoria and Jamal drove away was heavy. It was the kind of silence that usually precedes a tornado. Beatrice had gone to the grocery store, a simple errand to clear her head to pretend that her world hadn't just been cracked open. I stayed behind, raking the debris of the torn invoice into a pile. I was just putting the gardening shears away when the phone in the kitchen rang. It wasn't a normal ring. It sounded shrill, urgent. I picked it up. I didn't say hello. I just listened. Marcus. The voice was smooth, arrogant, and dripping with false pity. It was Preston Vance. I leaned against the counter, staring at the calendar on the wall marked with Beatrice's doctor appointments and church socials. "What do you want?" "Preston," I asked, my voice flat. "I just wanted to make sure you received the bill," Preston said. "Victoria told me you had a little temper tantrum. She said you ripped it up." "That was very dramatic, Marcus. Very cinematic. But tearing up a bill doesn't make the debt go away." I didn't answer. I let his voice fill the empty space. "I did some digging." Preston continued, his tone shifting from mocking to menacing. "I have friends in high places, Marcus. I checked your background. Dock worker, $20 an hour, a modest pension. You are a small man, Marcus. A very small man living in a very small world." I smiled. If only he knew how big my world really was. "And because you are a small man," Preston said, "I am going to give you a chance to survive. You are going to apologize to Victoria. You are going to write a public letter of apology to me. And you are going to set up a payment plan for that $50,000. $500 a month should take you, well, the rest of your life." "And if I don't?" I asked. Preston laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. "If you don't, then I start pulling strings. I know the administrator of the Dock Workers Union Pension Fund. We play golf. One phone call and I can have your monthly checks suspended for investigation. I can have your health insurance flagged for fraud review. Beatrice has high blood pressure, right? It would be a shame if she went to the pharmacy and found out her coverage was denied." I gripped the phone tight. He was threatening my wife's health. He was threatening the very fund that I had established 40 years ago to protect men like me. The irony was so thick I could taste it. He was going to call the administrator. He didn't know that the administrator reported to a board, and that board reported directly to me. "You are playing a dangerous game, Preston," I said quietly. "No," Marcus Preston snapped. "I am not playing. I am the game master. You are just a pawn. You have 24 hours. Apologize or starve." The line went dead. I stood there for a moment listening to the dial tone. He thought he could starve us. He thought he could cut off our lifeline. My anger wasn't hot anymore. It was cold. It was absolute. I looked at the clock. Beatrice had been gone for an hour. She should be back by now. Then my cell phone buzzed. It wasn't Beatrice. It was an unknown number. I answered it. "Mr. Thorne." "Yes. This is the manager at the supermart on 4th Street. We have your wife here." "Is she okay?" I asked, panic spiking in my chest. "Is she hurt?" "She is being detained," the manager said, his voice devoid of sympathy. "She attempted to pay for groceries with a card that has been reported stolen. When the transaction was declined, she tried to leave with the cart. Our security team stopped her. We are waiting for the police unless you can come down here and sort this out." I didn't ask questions. I ran. I jumped into my old Ford sedan and drove like a madman. The supermart was only 10 minutes away, but it felt like 10 hours. When I burst through the automatic doors, I saw her. Beatrice was sitting on a metal bench near the customer service desk. 2 large security guards were standing over her arms, crossed, looking at her like she was a criminal. Shoppers were walking by, staring, pointing, whispering. Beatrice was crying. She wasn't sobbing loudly. She was weeping silently, tears rolling down her cheeks onto the collar of her coat. She looked small. She looked defeated. I pushed past the manager. I pushed past the guards. "Get away from her," I snarled. I knelt in front of her. "Beatrice, look at me." She looked up. Her eyes were full of shame. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice trembling. It didn't work. The card. It just beeped. And then the machine said stolen. "But it is my card, Marcus. It is the card Jamal gave us for emergencies. The one linked to the family account." I knew instantly what had happened. Jamal, my son. He hadn't just stood by while his wife insulted us. He had actively joined the war. He had reported the card lost or stolen to humiliate his mother, to cut us off, to punish us for not paying the $50,000. "It is okay, Beatrice," I said, wiping her tears with my thumb. "It is a mistake." The manager stepped forward, holding the card. "It is not a mistake, sir." The card issuer flagged it. "This woman is attempting fraud." I stood up and turned to the manager. I towered over him. This woman is my wife, I said, my voice low and dangerous. And if you don't tell your goons to back off, I will buy this building and fire you before lunch. The manager blinked. He looked at my old clothes. He looked at my old car parked outside. He laughed nervously. Okay, tough guy. Just pay for the groceries or get out. We don't want trouble with folks like you. I pulled out a wad of cash from my pocket. My emergency gardening money. I threw it on the counter. Keep the change, I said. I helped Beatrice up. I put my arm around her. She buried her face in my shoulder, hiding from the staring eyes of the neighbors she had known for 20 years. We walked out to the car. I helped her into the passenger seat. She was shaking. Jamal did this, she whispered as I started the engine. Didn't he, Marcus? Jamal turned off the card. I didn't want to answer. I didn't want to break her heart any more than it was already broken. He made his choice. Beatrice, I said softly. She turned her head to look out the window. He is punishing me, she said, for the spilled food. He is punishing his own mother for not eating off the floor. I drove home in silence. The rage inside me was no longer a storm. It was a glacier, massive, unstoppable, crushing everything in its path. Preston threatened my pension. Jamal cut off my wife's credit. They were squeezing us. They were trying to suffocate us, believing we were weak, believing we were poor, believing we were helpless. They had no idea that they were poking a sleeping giant. We got home. I helped Beatrice to the bedroom. I took off her shoes. I pulled the blanket up to her chin. Rest, I said. What are you going to do, Marcus? She asked, grabbing my hand. Her grip was weak. I'm going to fix it, I said. I kissed her forehead. I walked out of the bedroom and closed the door. I walked down the hall to the small study at the back of the house. It was a room I rarely used. It was filled with old books and dusty boxes. I locked the door behind me. I walked to the closet. I pushed aside a stack of old coats. Behind the coats was a wall safe, not a cheap Home Depot safe. A commercial-grade titanium vault installed by a specialist team 10 years ago. I spun the dial, right to 20, left to 10, right to 5. Click. The heavy door swung open. Inside, there was no cash. I didn't keep cash here. Cash was for small men. Inside sat a satellite phone in a black case, and a single leather-bound book. I took the phone out. It was heavy in my hand. It felt like a weapon, because it was. I sat down at the dusty desk. I powered on the phone. It hummed to life, connecting to a secure network that bypassed the local grids, bypassed the prying eyes of men like Preston Vance. I dialed the number. It rang once. Thorne Logistics, chairman's office. The voice on the other end was crisp, efficient. It was my personal assistant, Sarah, who had been managing the empire in my absence under the strict protocols of my retirement. This is Marcus, I said. There was a pause, an intake of breath. Mr. Thorne. Sir. It has been a long time. Is everything all right? No. Sarah. I said, my voice like gravel. Everything is not all right. I need you to open the file on Vance Shipping. Yes, sir. I have it open. Preston Vance. I said, saying the name like a curse. He is the CEO of that subsidiary, correct? Yes, sir. He has been running it for 8 years. I want you to initiate Protocol Obsidian, I said. Sarah gasped. Sir, Obsidian is the Scorched Earth Protocol. It involves a complete forensic audit asset freezing and immediate suspension of executive powers. It is usually reserved for corporate espionage or massive theft. He stole something from me, Sarah, I said, looking at the closed door of the bedroom where my wife lay crying. He stole my dignity, and he threatened my family. I understand, Sir, Sarah said, her voice shifting to professional steel. Protocol Obsidian initiated. What are your specific instructions? I want his accounts frozen, I said. Not just the company accounts. His personal accounts. The Cayman accounts he thinks I don't know about. The shell companies. Everything. I want his credit cards to stop working within the hour. I want his security clearance revoked. And Sir Sarah asked, what about the pension fund threat? You mentioned he threatened the pension. I laughed. A dark, humorless sound. He said he knows the administrator. He does, Sir Sarah said. The administrator is Mr. Henderson. He is Preston's golf partner. Fire him, I said. Sir, fire Henderson. Today. For conflict of interest and conspiracy to commit fraud, and send a memo to the entire board. Tell them the chairman is awake. Tell them the chairman is watching. Yes, Mr. Thorne? Anything else? Yes, I said. My son, Jamal Thorne. He is an employee at Vance Shipping, is he not? A junior executive. Yes, sir. VP of Marketing. Freeze his assets too, I said. His salary, his bonuses, the company car, the company apartment. Cut it all. Sir Sarah hesitated. That is your son. I closed my eyes. I saw Beatrice crying on the bench at the supermarket. He is not my son today, I whispered. Today he is just another employee who forgot who signs his checks. Do it, Sarah. Consider it done, sir. I hung up the phone. I sat there in the silence of the dusty room. Preston Vance wanted a war. He wanted to use money as a weapon. He wanted to crush the little guy. He didn't know that the little guy owned the battlefield. I put the phone back in the safe. I spun the dial. I walked back to the bedroom. Beatrice was asleep, finally exhausted by the humiliation. I stood by the bed and watched her breathe. Sleep, my love, I thought. Tomorrow morning, when Preston Vance tries to buy his morning coffee and his card is declined, he will know how it feels. When he tries to enter his office and his badge doesn't work, he will know how it feels. They wanted to isolate us, but they just isolated themselves on an island that was sinking into the sea, and I was the one pulling the plug. The week that followed the supermarket incident was a test of endurance. We sat in our small house surrounded by the silence of a phone that refused to ring. Beatrice spent her days looking at old photo albums tracing the face of the son who had cut off her credit card. I spent my days in the study watching the digital reports from the forensic audit of Vance Shipping. The numbers on my screen were damning. Preston Vance wasn't just skimming off the top, he was draining the company dry. He was moving millions into offshore shell companies and using the corporate accounts like his personal piggy bank. Then on Thursday evening, the invitation came. It wasn't a handwritten note or a phone call. It was a text message sent to Beatrice's phone from Victoria. Come to dinner Saturday night. New penthouse. Let's make peace. That was it. No apology, no explanation, just a command disguised as an olive branch. Beatrice looked at me with hopeful eyes. She wanted to believe it was real. She wanted to believe that her son missed her. I knew better. I knew that people like Victoria don't make peace, they make maneuvers. But I looked at my wife's sad face and I nodded. We would go. But I wasn't going to make peace. I was going to inspect the crime scene. Saturday night arrived. We drove into the city in my old Ford sedan. The penthouse was located in the Tribeca district in a building where the doorman wore a uniform that cost more than my entire wardrobe. When we pulled up, the valet looked at my car with open disdain. He didn't want to park it. He wanted to call a tow truck. I handed him the keys and a $10 bill. Keep it close, I said. We won't be staying long. We took the private elevator to the top floor. The doors opened directly into the apartment. It was a palace of glass and marble. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the Manhattan skyline. The furniture was white leather. The art on the walls was modern and expensive. I looked around and I didn't see a home. I see evidence. I knew exactly where the money for this penthouse came from. I had seen the wire transfer in the audit logs just yesterday. $3 million siphoned from the employee pension fund labeled as capital improvements. Preston had stolen the retirement security of 3,000 workers to buy this glass cage for his daughter. Victoria was waiting for us in the foyer. She was wearing a black cocktail dress and holding a glass of wine. Jamal was standing behind her looking nervous. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Well, you made it, Victoria said, sipping her wine. I honestly didn't think you would come. I thought you would be too embarrassed after the scene you caused at the wedding. Beatrice stepped forward, clutching her purse. We came to see Jamal, she said softly. We want to be a family, Victoria. Victoria laughed. It was a dry, brittle sound. Family, right. Well, come in. Don't stand on the marble. Your shoes look dirty. We walked into the living room. It was vast and cold. There was no smell of food cooking. No warmth. Where is dinner? Beatrice asked, trying to make conversation. Victoria turned around, a wicked smile curling her lips. Oh, that is the thing, Victoria said. The maid called in sick today. Can you believe it? Probably just lazy. You know how help can be. She gestured toward the kitchen. It was a state-of-the-art culinary workspace with stainless steel appliances and granite countertops. So we have a bit of a problem, Victoria continued. Preston is coming over in an hour. He is bringing 2 very important investors, men who can make or break Jamal's career. We need to impress them. She looked at Beatrice. I ordered the ingredients, Victoria said. Steaks, truffle mash, asparagus. But I can't cook. I would ruin my manicure. But Jamal tells me you used to work in a cafeteria or something, right, Beatrice? You know how to handle a stove. Beatrice blinked, confused. You want me to cook? She asked. I want you to help out, Victoria said. Since you can't contribute financially to this family, the least you can do is contribute some labor. Consider it payment for the wedding disaster. My blood ran cold. She hadn't invited us to apologize. She had invited us to serve. She wanted to reduce my wife to a kitchen maid in front of her father and his business partners. She wanted to show Preston that she had broken us. Beatrice looked at Jamal. Jamal, I am your mother. You want me to cook for your guests. Jamal looked at Victoria. He looked at the floor. Mom, please, he mumbled. It is a big night. Preston is really stressing about these investors. Just help us out. You are a great cook. It would really save us. Beatrice's shoulders slumped. She loved her son so much it was painful to watch. She was willing to be humiliated just to be useful to him. Okay, she whispered. I will do it. Where is the apron? She started to walk toward the kitchen. I moved. I stepped in front of her, blocking her path. I took her hand. It was cold and trembling. No, I said. Marcus, Beatrice pleaded. It is okay. I don't mind. I mind, I said, my voice low and hard. You are not a maid, Beatrice. You are his mother, and you are my wife. You do not touch that stove. I turned to Victoria. If you can't cook, order a pizza, I said. Or better yet, ask your father to pay for a chef with the money he stole from my company. I didn't say the last part out loud. Not yet. Victoria's eyes narrowed. You are being difficult again, Marcus, she snapped. You are guests in my house. You should be grateful we let you in. If you aren't going to help, then sit down and shut up. She pointed to a small, uncomfortable-looking wooden bench near the door. Sit there, she ordered, and try not to touch anything. I looked at the bench. Then I looked at the living room. In the center of the room, facing the massive window and the view of the city, sat a large, high-backed leather armchair. It looked like a throne. It was clearly the seat of power in this house. I walked past the wooden bench. I walked past the white leather sofa. I walked straight to the leather armchair. What are you doing? Victoria asked, her voice rising. I didn't answer. I turned around and sat down. The chair was soft, expensive leather. I leaned back. I crossed my legs. I placed my arms on the rests. I looked like I owned the place, because in a very real legal sense I did. Victoria dropped her wine glass. It shattered on the marble, spilling red liquid everywhere. Get up, she screamed. Get up right now. Why? I asked calmly. It is a comfortable chair. That is Preston's chair, she yelled. That is my father's chair. Nobody sits there but him. He is the guest of honor. He is the CEO. He is the man who paid for this apartment. You are dirtying the leather with your cheap suit. Get up. I rubbed the armrest with my thumb. I looked at Jamal, who was staring at me with his mouth open. Your father-in-law has expensive taste, son, I said, but he has bad judgment. Get out of the chair, Victoria shrieked, running toward me. She looked like she was going to physically pull me out. I didn't move. I just looked at her with the eyes of the chairman. She stopped 3 feet away, breathless with rage. You are trying to provoke him, she hissed. You want him to destroy you. When he walks in that door and sees you sitting in his spot, he is going to evict you from your life. I shifted in the seat. I rocked it slightly back and forth. You know, Victoria, I said, my voice conversational as if we were discussing the weather. This chair feels impressive. It looks solid. It looks powerful. I leaned forward and the chair gave a slight squeak. But the legs are loose, I said. What she asked, confused by my calm. The foundation is weak, I continued. One good push and the whole thing collapses. I looked her dead in the eye. Just like your father's position. What are you talking about? She spat. My father is untouchable. Nobody is untouchable, Victoria, I said. Especially not men who build their castles on sand. The doorbell rang. Victoria jumped. Panic flashed across her face. It is him, she whispered. It is Preston. And the investors. She turned to me, desperate now. Please, she hissed. Get up. Hide in the kitchen. Don't ruin this. These investors are vital. If this dinner goes bad, what I asked. The money stops flowing. Yes, she screamed. Now move. I leaned back deeper into the chair. I clasped my hands over my stomach. Open the door, Victoria, I said. She looked at me. She looked at the door. She looked at Jamal, who was cowering in the corner. She realized I wasn't moving. Fine, she said, her voice shaking with malice. Stay there. Let him find you. Let him crush you. I tried to warn you, old man. She smoothed her dress. She put on her fake smile. She walked to the door. I looked at Beatrice. She was standing by the sofa looking terrified. Sit down, Beatrice, I said, pointing to the sofa. But Marcus... Sit down, I repeated gently. The show is about to start. Beatrice sat. I waited. I heard the door open. I heard Preston's booming voice. Victoria, darling, you look stunning. And this apartment, every time I see it, I know it was worth every penny. I heard other voices, men's voices, professional, serious. Come in, Preston said. I want you to meet my daughter, and my son-in-law, and... Oh, I see we have some extra guests. Preston walked into the living room. He was wearing a tuxedo. He looked like a penguin who had eaten too much fish. Flanking him were two men in gray suits. Preston stopped. He saw Beatrice on the sofa. Then he looked at the window. He looked at the high-backed leather chair. He saw me. I didn't stand up. I didn't smile. I just watched him. Preston's face went from jovial to purple in less than a second. You, he sputtered. What are you doing in my chair? Hello, Preston, I said. I was just telling your daughter that this seat is a little wobbly. You might want to be careful. Preston turned to the two investors. Gentlemen, I apologize, he said, his voice tight. This is the help. My son-in-law's parents. They are a bit senile. They don't know their place. He marched toward me. Get out, he hissed so only I could hear. Get out before I call the police. I looked at the two investors. One of them was looking at me closely. He was squinting. He tilted his head. I recognized him. It was Tom Miller. He was a junior analyst at Thorn Logistics 10 years ago. He had moved up the ranks. He had never met the chairman in person, but he had seen the portrait in the main hallway. I smiled at Tom. Good evening, gentlemen, I said. I hope you are hungry. I hear the chef is indisposed, so we might be ordering pizza. Preston looked ready to explode. Victoria, call security, he shouted. I stayed seated. The loose leg of the chair creaked. The collapse had begun. The door opened and the room instantly shrank. Preston Vance didn't just walk into a room, he invaded it. He came in surrounded by a cloud of expensive cologne and the loud, booming laughter of a man who believes his own hype. Flanking him were two men in gray suits. I recognized one of them immediately. Tom Miller, a junior director at the logistics firm, a man whose hiring paperwork I had signed 10 years ago, but who had never met me in person. He was young, hungry, and clearly desperate to impress the boss. Preston strode into the living room like a conquering hero returning with spoils of war. He was holding a glass of scotch that he had poured for himself from the bar cart in the hallway. He didn't look at Beatrice. He didn't look at Jamal. He looked at the view. Gentlemen, look at this, he shouted, gesturing at the city lights with his glass. This is what success looks like. From the gutter to the penthouse in one generation. And soon it is going to get even better. He turned to Tom Miller, grinning like a shark. I haven't made the official announcement yet, Preston said, lowering his voice to a theatrical whisper. But the word from the top is that the parent company, Thorn Logistics, is looking for a new vice president of operations. And guess whose name is on the short list? Tom Miller nodded enthusiastically. It is well-deserved, Preston. Nobody runs a ship like you. Preston beamed. Exactly. The old guard is dying out. That mysterious chairman nobody ever sees, he is probably senile by now. It is time for new blood. It is time for the Vance era. He turned around, ready to sit in his throne, ready to hold court. And then he stopped. He saw me. I was still sitting in the high-backed leather armchair. My legs were crossed. My hands were folded calmly on my lap. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just looked at him with the cold, detached interest of a judge watching a defendant perjure himself. Preston's face went through a fascinating transformation. First confusion, then recognition, then pure, unadulterated rage. The veins in his neck bulged against his tight collar. You, he sputtered. He took a step forward, pointing a shaking finger at me. What the hell are you doing in my chair? Preston roared. Victoria ran over, looking terrified. Dad, I tried to tell him. He refused to move. He is doing it on purpose. Preston ignored her. He marched right up to me until his face was inches from mine. "Get up," he hissed, his voice dripping with venom. "Get up right now, you old leech. Who do you think you are, sitting there like you own the place? This is a business meeting. I have important guests. I don't need the help lounging on my furniture." I looked at Tom Miller, who was watching with a sneer on his face, mimicking his boss. He saw an old black man in a cheap suit and assumed I was nobody. He didn't know he was looking at the man who owned his mortgage. I turned my gaze back to Preston. "Hello, Preston," I said, my voice low and steady. "You are looking well. Stress hasn't gotten to you yet, I see." "Get out!" Preston screamed. "Jamal, get your father out of here before I throw him off the balcony." I stayed seated. I didn't even blink. "I hear you are up for a promotion," I said casually. "Vice president." "That is impressive." Preston laughed, a harsh barking sound. "What would a janitor know about corporate promotions? Now move." I leaned forward slightly. The leather chair creaked under my weight. "I know enough, Preston," I said. "For example, I know that to be vice president, you need to show steady growth. You need clean books." Preston rolled his eyes. "Security!" he shouted. I raised my voice just enough to cut through his shouting. "So tell me, Preston," I said, locking eyes with him, "how is the North Sea project going?" Preston froze. His mouth hung open mid-shout. The color drained from his face, instantly turning him a sickly shade of gray. The room went deadly silent. Even Victoria stopped her whining. The North Sea project was a classified black ops shipping route. It didn't exist on public records. It didn't exist on the company website. It only existed in the encrypted ledgers that only the CEO and the chairman had access to. "What did you say?" Preston whispered. I smiled. It was a cold smile. "The North Sea," I repeated. "I heard there were some complications. A fuel leak perhaps, or maybe it was just bad accounting. I heard the books are showing a deficit, 12% to be exact." Preston staggered back as if I had punched him in the gut. He grabbed the back of the sofa to steady himself. 12%. That was the magic number. The exact amount he had skimmed, the exact amount that was missing. It was a number that only he and his corrupt accountant knew. How he stammered. "How do you know that number?" He looked at Jamal. His eyes were wild with paranoia. "You told him," Preston shouted at Jamal. "You little spy. You looked at my files. You told your father my business secrets." Jamal looked terrified. "I didn't, Preston, I swear. I don't even know what the North Sea project is. I am in marketing." Preston looked back at me. He was sweating now. Profuse beads of sweat were forming on his forehead. He was trying to rationalize it. He was trying to convince himself that I was just a lucky guesser, that I was just an old man repeating numbers I had overheard. "It is a lie," Preston said, his voice shaking. "You don't know what you are talking about. You are just a crazy old man making up stories. 12%. That is nonsense. The company is stronger than ever." "Is it?" I asked, leaning back into the chair. "Because from where I am sitting, it looks like the foundation is cracking. And when the foundation cracks, the whole house comes down." Preston wiped his face with a handkerchief. He forced a laugh. It sounded manic. "Pay no attention to him, gentlemen," he said to the investors, his voice high and tight. "He is my son-in-law's father. He has dementia. He reads conspiracy theories online and thinks he is a stockbroker. It is sad, really. Very sad." He turned to Victoria, desperate to change the subject, desperate to regain control. "Victoria, darling, why are we standing around? Where are the refreshments? My guests are thirsty." Victoria looked at her father. She saw the fear in his eyes, and she knew she had to fix it. She had to put the power dynamic back in order. She had to show these men that the Vances were the masters and the Thorns were the servants. She turned to Beatrice. My wife was standing in the corner, trying to make herself invisible. "You," Victoria snapped, snapping her fingers at Beatrice. "Hey, wake up." Beatrice flinched. "My father is thirsty," Victoria said, pointing to the pitcher of ice water on the sideboard. "Pour drinks for the guests. Now." Beatrice looked at me. She looked at Jamal. Jamal was staring at the floor, refusing to intervene. "Do it!" Victoria yelled. "Unless you want us to kick you out right now. Unless you want Jamal to lose his job. Be useful for once in your life." Beatrice swallowed her pride. She picked up the heavy crystal pitcher. Her hands were shaking. She walked over to the investors. She approached Tom Miller. "Water, sir?" she asked softly. Tom didn't even look at her. He was busy looking at his phone, texting someone, probably laughing about the crazy old man in the chair. He held out his glass without looking up. "Yeah, fill it up," he said dismissively. Beatrice poured, but her hand trembled. The pitcher was heavy. A splash of ice water went over the rim. It landed on Tom's sleeve. Just a few drops. Tom reacted as if he had been scalded with acid. He jerked his hand back, hitting the pitcher. "Hey, watch it!" he shouted. The pitcher slipped from Beatrice's hand. It crashed onto the table, shattering into pieces. Water and ice flooded the expensive surface, dripping onto the rug. "You stupid woman," Tom yelled, standing up and brushing the water off his suit. "Look what you did! This is Armani. Are you blind or just incompetent?" "I am sorry," Beatrice cried, reaching for a napkin. "I am so sorry, sir." "Get away from me," Tom sneered, pushing her hand away. "Don't touch me. You people are all the same. Clumsy and useless." "Preston, where did you find these clowns? They belong in a circus, not a penthouse." Victoria rushed over not to help Beatrice but to check the table. "My table," she screamed. "The water is ruining the finish. Mom, you idiot, you ruin everything." She turned to Beatrice, who was standing amidst the broken glass, weeping. "Get on your knees," Victoria ordered, pointing at the puddle. "Clean it up. Right now. Use your dress if you have to. Just dry it before it stains." Beatrice looked at Jamal. "Help me," she mouthed. Jamal looked at his mother. He looked at his boss. He looked at his wife. And he did nothing. He turned his back. That was the moment. The final straw. The moment the camel's back didn't just break, it disintegrated. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. I stood up. I rose from the leather chair like a titan rising from the depths. The air in the room seemed to change. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. I walked over to the table. My boots crunched on the broken glass. I stopped in front of Beatrice. I gently took her arm and pulled her away from the mess. "Stand back, Beatrice," I said softly. Then I turned to Tom Miller. "You pushed her," I said. Tom laughed. "I didn't push her. She dropped it. She is clumsy." "You pushed her," I repeated, my voice getting louder. "You disrespected my wife." "Who cares?" Tom scoffed. "She is a maid. She is a nobody." I picked up a heavy crystal tumbler from the table. It was thick, heavy glass. I looked at Preston. I looked at Victoria. I looked at Jamal. "You wanted a show," I said. "You wanted to see the help perform." I raised the glass high above my head. "Well, here's the finale." I brought the glass down. I slammed it onto the marble table with every ounce of strength I had. Smash! The sound was like a gunshot. Shards of glass exploded outward, flying across the room. The table cracked down the middle, a spiderweb fracture running through the expensive stone. Silence. Absolute, terrified silence. Tom Miller jumped back, his face pale. Victoria screamed and covered her mouth. Preston looked like he was having a heart attack. I stood there breathing hard, my hands still resting on the ruined table. I looked at them one by one. "The party is over," I said. I looked at Preston. "And so is your career." I grabbed Beatrice's hand. "We are leaving," I said. "Marcus," Beatrice whispered, looking at the destruction. "What did you do?" "I did what our son should have done," I said loud enough for Jamal to hear. "I protected you." I walked toward the door, dragging Beatrice with me. Preston found his voice. "You are crazy," he shouted, his voice shaking. "You are insane. You are going to pay for that table. You are going to pay for everything." "I will bury you, Marcus. Do you hear me? I will bury you under so much debt you will never see the sun again." I stopped at the door. I turned around. I looked at Preston. I looked at the fear hiding behind his bluster. "You don't have to bury me, Preston," I said. I pulled the door handle. "I am already the dirt you walk on. But you forgot one thing about dirt." What Preston breathed. "If you pile it high enough," I said, "it becomes a mountain, and mountains have a habit of causing avalanches." I slammed the door. The sound echoed down the hallway like the closing of a coffin lid. We walked to the elevator. Beatrice was shaking. "Marcus," she said, "that man, Tom, he works for the company. He works for you." I pressed the button for the lobby. "Not anymore," I said. I took out my phone. "Sarah," I said into the receiver as the doors closed. "Yes, Mr. Thorne. Terminate Tom Miller, effective immediately. Cause for termination: gross misconduct and public disrespect of the chairman's family." There was a pause. Then Sarah's voice, cool and efficient. "Done, sir." His access pass has been deactivated. And Sarah? Yes, sir. Tell security to escort him out of the building, and tell them to handle him carefully. He is wearing Armani. We wouldn't want to ruin his suit. I grabbed Jamal by the elbow and pulled him away from the wreckage of the marble table. He tried to resist, his eyes darting around the room looking for Victoria as if he needed her permission to even breathe. I didn't care. I dragged him toward the sliding glass doors and pushed him out onto the balcony. The night air of the city hit us cold and sharp, a brutal contrast to the suffocating heat of the penthouse. 50 stories below, the lights of New York City stretched out like a carpet of diamonds. It was a view that made men feel like gods, but as I looked at my son, all I saw was a man who had shrunk until he was almost invisible. I stood by the railing, the wind whipping my gray hair. I didn't look at him at first. I looked at the horizon. Jamal. I said, my voice low and heavy like the rumble of a distant storm. Do you remember what I told you when you were 10 years old? Do you remember the day we sat on the docks after my shift? Jamal rubbed his arm, shivering in his thin silk shirt. Dad, please, he whispered. Not now. Preston is going to call the police. You broke his table. You humiliated him in front of Miller. We have to go back in there and apologize. We have to fix this. I turned to face him. I ignored his whining. I told you that a man is only as good as the people he protects, I said. I told you that money comes and goes, but the soil you stand on is your family. I spent 40 years breaking my back so you would never have to know the taste of hunger. I worked double shifts so you could have the best schools, the best clothes, the best life. I didn't do it so you could become a footstool for a man like Preston Vance. Dad, you don't understand. Jamal cried, his voice cracking with desperation. This is the real world. This isn't the docks. Preston is powerful. He is the CEO of the company I work for. He owns the building we live in. He is my future. I took a step toward him. I was 71 years old, but in that moment, I felt like the mountain I used to be. I don't care how he treats me, Jamal, I said. I have been called every name in the book by men much bigger than Preston Vance. I can handle a spoiled girl and her arrogant father. But that woman in there, the woman whose eyes are red from crying because her own son watched her being treated like a servant, that is your mother. That is Beatrice. The woman who stayed up all night when you had a fever. The woman who worked 2 jobs so you could have that Ivy League degree you are so proud of. I gripped the railing so hard the metal groaned. If you do not walk back through those doors right now, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper. If you do not stand in front of that man and tell him that he will never disrespect your mother again, then you are no longer a thorn. You will have no father. You will have no mother. You will be a man alone in a world of sharks. Jamal looked at me, and for a second I saw a flicker of the boy I used to know. I saw a spark of pride. But then the doors opened slightly and we heard Victoria's shrill voice from inside. Jamal, she screamed, get in here. Tell your father he is paying for the damage. Tell him he is banned from our lives. The spark in Jamal's eyes went out. It didn't just fade, it died. He looked at the penthouse, at the expensive art, at the lifestyle he had sold his soul to obtain. He looked at me, and his face hardened into a mask of cold, pathetic pragmatism. Dad, he said, his voice flat and empty. Get real. Real, I asked. Look at you, Jamal said, gesturing at my suit. Look at this house. Preston is my lifeblood. He gives me a 6-figure salary. He gives me a corner office. He gave me Victoria. What have you ever given me besides a lecture on hard work and some hand-me-down values? You give me love, Dad. But love doesn't pay for a penthouse in Tribeca. Love doesn't get me a seat at the table with the people who matter. Love doesn't put food on this table. He took a step back toward the glass doors, away from me, away from the wind, away from the truth. I choose Victoria, he said. I choose the Vances. They have the power. They have the money. You are just a ghost from a past I am trying to forget. If being your son means being poor and invisible, then I don't want to be your son anymore. Go back to your garden, Marcus. Go back to your pension and your memories. Leave us alone. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard. I felt something inside me snap. It wasn't my heart. My heart had hardened into diamond long ago. It was the last thread of hope I held for my only child. I looked at him and I didn't see my son anymore. I saw an employee who had failed his probation. I saw a man who had traded a mountain of gold for a handful of salt. I nodded slowly. I reached out and adjusted Jamal's tie. It was silk, expensive. Bought with money he thought came from Preston. I straightened it perfectly. I looked him in the eye and the warmth in my gaze was gone. It was replaced by the cold, clinical stare of the chairman. "I understand," I said. Jamal seemed surprised by my lack of anger. He thought I would beg. He thought I would cry. He didn't know that when a man like me stops talking, the damage is already done. "Is that it?" Jamal asked. "You are just going to walk away?" I let go of his tie. I stepped back. "Yes," I said. "I am walking away. But remember this, Jamal. Remember it when the lights go out. Remember it when the cards stop working and the doors start locking. Remember what Jamal sneered." I looked at the penthouse through the glass. I saw Preston laughing with Miller. I saw Victoria pouring another drink. "You sold your soul, Jamal," I said, my voice like a funeral bell. "And you sold it for a very cheap price. You think you are a king because you sit in their chairs. But you are just a tenant in a house of cards, and I am the one who owns the wind." I turned my back on him. I walked back through the living room. Preston tried to say something as I passed. He held up his broken glass as if to toast my defeat. I didn't even look at him. I walked to Beatrice. She was standing by the door holding her purse, her face a mask of grief. "Let's go, Beatrice," I said. We walked to the elevator. The doors closed. As we descended, I pulled out my phone. I didn't use the safe line. I used the direct line to the corporate head of security. "This is Thorne," I said. "Yes, sir. My son Jamal Thorne. Remove him from the family trust. Cancel the executive housing allowance for the Tribeca property. And the corporate car. I want it towed tonight." "Sir, that will leave him on the street," the voice said. "He chose his family," I said, staring at my reflection in the elevator doors. "Now let him see what they are willing to pay for him." I hung up. Beatrice looked at me, her eyes full of tears. "Marcus, is there no other way?" I took her hand. It was cold. "He thinks love isn't enough to eat, Beatrice," I said, "so I am going to let him try to eat the money he loves so much. But he is going to find out that you can't swallow gold when your throat is full of lies." The elevator hit the lobby. We walked out past the doorman who didn't even look at us. Tomorrow, the audit would finish. Tomorrow, the bank would move. Tomorrow, Jamal would find out that the man he traded for a penthouse was the man who could take the roof off the world. He chose the Vances. But I was the thorn, and the Vances were about to find out just how deep my roots went. The drive home from the penthouse was the quietest 30 minutes of my life. Beatrice sat in the passenger seat, staring out at the blurred lights of the city, her hand clutching her purse as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. She didn't ask about the table. She didn't ask about the North Sea project. She didn't even ask why I had suddenly become a man she barely recognized. She just breathed in slow, shallow cycles. Every time we passed under a streetlight, I could see the faint red mark on her cheek where the water had splashed and the humiliation had burned. My son had watched his mother be treated like a servant, and he had chosen the people who held the leash. It was a cold realization that sat in my stomach like a block of ice. We pulled into our gravel driveway. The small house stood there humble and unassuming, a silent witness to the years of peace I had tried to build. I helped Beatrice inside. I walked her to the bedroom and sat her on the edge of the mattress. I took off her shoes. I kissed her forehead. "Go to sleep, Beatrice," I whispered. "The storm is over for you. But for them, the wind is just picking up." She didn't say a word. She just lay back and closed her eyes, exhausted by a grief that no medicine could cure. I walked out of the bedroom and closed the door softly. I didn't go to the kitchen for a glass of water. I didn't go to the porch to watch the moon. I went to the end of the hallway to a room that stayed locked 364 days a year. I turned the key and stepped inside. The study was dark, smelling of old paper and leather. I didn't turn on the overhead lights. I walked to the heavy oak desk and sat down. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out a sleek silver laptop. It wasn't the kind of machine you buy at a retail store. It was a hardened workstation connected to a dedicated satellite uplink. I opened the lid, and the screen glowed a sharp, piercing blue. Identification required, the machine whispered in a neutral digital voice. I placed my thumb on the glass scanner. A red line tracked across my skin, reading the ridges and scars of 40 years of manual labor. Thumbprint confirmed. "Please look into the camera." I leaned forward. A green laser scanned my retina, mapping the unique patterns of my eye. Retina scan confirmed. Welcome back, Chairman Thorne. Purge protocol is available. Do you wish to proceed? I stared at the screen. My heart wasn't racing. It was steady. It was cold. I thought about Jamal's face on the balcony. I thought about the way he said love doesn't pay for a penthouse. He wanted to know the reality of the world. Well, I was about to give him a masterclass in reality. Proceed, I said. The screen transformed into a map of the global logistics network. Tens of thousands of ships, trucks, and warehouses appeared as tiny glowing dots. At the center of it all was a red folder labeled Vance Shipping, a subsidiary, a parasite that had forgotten it was attached to a host. I opened the folder. The numbers were there. The theft, the embezzlement. Preston Vance had been a busy man. He had been stealing from the pension fund to buy pearls for his daughter and silk shirts for my son. He thought he was a genius. He thought I was a ghost. Command 1. I said, my voice echoing in the small room. Initiate a full forensic audit of Vance Shipping. All branches, all accounts. I want the federal auditors on the doorstep by 8 a.m. No warnings, no phone calls. Freeze the internal servers. If a single byte of data is deleted, I want the IT director in handcuffs. I watched the digital command ripple through the system. Somewhere in the city, server rooms were locking down. Lights were turning from green to red. The hunting dogs were being unleashed. Command 2, I said. I pulled up the file for Jamal Thorne, my only son, my greatest investment, my deepest regret. Jamal lived in a penthouse in Tribeca. He drove a luxury SUV. He wore watches that cost more than a teacher makes in a year. He thought he earned those things. He thought Preston Vance gave them to him as a reward for his brilliance. He was wrong. Preston Vance didn't have any money of his own. Every luxury Jamal enjoyed was a corporate asset owned by a subsidiary of Thorne Logistics. The apartment was a corporate perk. The car was a lease under the company name. The salary was a line item I had approved. Freeze all assets associated with employee ID 0974 Jamal Thorne, I commanded. The Tribeca property, the vehicle, the expense accounts, all of it. Issue an immediate eviction notice effective at noon tomorrow. If he wants a penthouse, let him see if Victoria's love can pay the rent. I felt a twinge of pain in my chest, but I pushed it down. A father corrects his son. A chairman terminates a failure. Tonight I was the chairman. Command 3, I said. I opened a blank search window. Victoria Vance. I didn't know much about the girl who had ruined my son. I knew she was pretty. I knew she was cruel. But people like her always have a shadow. You don't become that arrogant without having something to hide. Run a deep dive on Victoria Vance, I said. I want her school records, her bank history, her social circles. I want to know who she was before she met my son. Find the rot. Every diamond has a flaw. Find hers. The computer began to hum. Data started scrolling past in a blur. Names, dates, wire transfers. I watched it for hours. I didn't feel tired. I didn't feel old. I felt like the man who had fought his way out of the docks. I was protecting my territory. The sun began to peek over the horizon, painting the walls of the study in a pale gray light. I closed the laptop. I walked to the kitchen and made a pot of coffee. The house was quiet. Beatrice was still asleep. The world was about to explode for the Vance family, and they were currently sleeping in their stolen silk sheets, unaware that the ground had already been removed from beneath them. At 7:30 a.m., my personal phone buzzed. It was a call from Jamal. I didn't answer. I let it ring. 10 seconds later, it buzzed again. Preston Vance. I picked it up. I didn't say a word. Marcus Preston's voice was a ragged scream. It wasn't the booming laugh from the night before. It was a high-pitched whine of pure panic. "What did you do, you old bastard?" Preston shrieked. I can hear the background noise of sirens through the phone. "What are you talking about, Preston?" I asked, sipping my coffee. "The auditors are here, Marcus. Federal agents. They are in my lobby. They are seizing the computers. They have a warrant for my personal records. They said there is a discrepancy in the North Sea accounts." How did they get that information? How did they get into the encrypted files? I looked out the window at my garden. The hydrangeas were looking thirsty. "Maybe you should have focused more on the books and less on the wine," Preston, I said. "It was you," Preston gasped. "I know it was you. Jamal told me you said something about the 12%. You tipped them off. You ruined me because of a spilled plate of food. You are a madman. I am a husband, Preston, I corrected him. And I told you the price of admission to my world just went up. You think this is over, Preston roared. I have lawyers. I will fight this. You are just a witness. You have no proof. I heard another voice in the background, a frantic Victoria screaming about her credit cards. Preston Jamal's voice came through the line, distant and terrified. The car. The tow truck is here for the car. They said the lease was canceled. Dad, are you there? I didn't answer my son. I just looked at the steam rising from my cup. Marcus Preston said, his voice trembling now. What is happening? My bank accounts are frozen. My cards are declined. I can't even pay the retainers for the lawyers. I stood up and walked toward the study to check the latest data on Victoria. You should have eaten the food on the floor, Preston, I said. It would have been a lot cheaper than what you are about to pay. I hung up the phone. The first reports from the investigation into Victoria were starting to populate the screen. It was better than I expected. She wasn't just a spoiled girl. She was a professional, a social climber with a history of broken men and emptied bank accounts. And the most interesting part, she had been married before, to a man who had died under very mysterious financial circumstances. I smiled. The sun was fully up now. I walked to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. Beatrice opened her eyes. She looked at me and saw the Tom Ford suit I had laid out on the chair. Marcus, she whispered. Where are you going? I am going to a meeting. Beatrice, I said. Who are you meeting? The board of directors, I said. It is time they met the man who has been paying their salaries while they were busy looking the other way. I kissed her hand. Don't worry about the groceries, Beatrice. By this afternoon, we will own the store. I walked out of the house. I didn't take the Ford. A black SUV with tinted windows was waiting at the end of the driveway. A driver in a suit stepped out and opened the door. Good morning, Mr. Thorne, the driver said. Good morning, Arthur, I said. Take me to the office. We have a lot of trash to move today. As we drove away, I saw Jamal standing on the curb of the street looking at his phone. He looked small. He looked lost. He looked like the man he had chosen to be. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. The purge protocol was in full effect, and there were no exceptions for family. Not when the family had forgotten the meaning of the word. The morning air was crisp, but it was the kind of cold that feels like a warning. While Beatrice was finally resting in the bedroom, I sat in the kitchen watching the small screen of my silver laptop. The digital clock in the corner of the screen ticked over to 10 a.m. In the world of high finance, 10 a.m. is when the wheels of the machine really start to grind. And today, I was the one who had thrown a handful of gravel into the gears. I watched the live data feeds. The accounts belonging to Jamal Thorne were now officially locked. The corporate lease on the red convertible was flagged for repossession. The credit lines for Victoria Vance were deactivated. They had been living on borrowed time and stolen money, and now the bill had finally come due. At that exact moment, 40 blocks away, Victoria was standing in the middle of a high-end boutique on Fifth Avenue. I know this because the system sent me an alert the second she tried to use her card. She was trying to buy a set of designer luggage worth $12,000. She probably thought a shopping trip would help her recover from the embarrassment of the night before. She thought a new bag could fix the hole in her ego. The sales associate, a young man with a fake smile and a sharp suit, took her card with a bow. A moment later, the smile vanished. I can see the transaction log in my mind. Declined. Insufficient funds. Restricted account. The associate tried again. This time, the machine didn't just beep. It kept the card. I am sorry, Mom, the associate said, his voice losing its warmth. The machine has retained the card. You will need to contact your bank. Victoria's reaction was predictable. She didn't ask for a phone. She didn't apologize. She screamed. She called the associate incompetent. She threatened to have him fired. She demanded to see the manager. But then the security guard stepped forward. The same kind of man she had treated like dirt her whole life. He didn't care about her yellow dress or her expensive perfume. He only saw a woman whose money had run out. Please leave the store, ma'am, he said, his hand resting on his belt. Victoria was escorted out into the bright morning sun, empty-handed and humiliated. She had to take a taxi home because her car had been remotely disabled by the GPS tracking system. But when she tried to pay the taxi driver with another card that was declined too, she had to dig through her purse for loose change like the beggars she so despised. When she finally reached the penthouse, she burst through the doors like a hurricane. Jamal was sitting on the white leather sofa in the dark. The blinds were still drawn. He looked like a ghost. He was staring at his phone, which was now nothing more than a glass paperweight. No service, no data. "Jamal!" she shrieked, throwing her purse at his head. "What is going on? My cards are dead. They took my card at the store. I had to pay a cab driver in nickels." "What did you do?" Jamal didn't even flinch when the purse hit him. He just looked at her with hollow eyes. "It is over, Victoria," he whispered. "What is over?" she yelled. "Everything. The office called. They said my security clearance is gone. They told me not to come in. They said there is an audit. And the car... I tried to start the car to go look for you. It wouldn't turn over. It said lease terminated on the dashboard." Victoria froze. The rage in her eyes shifted to a cold, calculating fear. She didn't think about her husband. She didn't think about his career. She thought about herself. "It's your father," she hissed, her face contorting into a mask of hatred. "That old man. He did something. He called someone. He probably made up lies about me. He probably told the police I stole something." She grabbed Jamal's phone and realized it was dead. She grabbed her own and saw the SOS message in the corner. "He's trying to kill us," she screamed. "He's trying to take everything we have." She ran to the landline in the kitchen, a decorative antique phone that cost $5,000. She dialed my number. I was sitting at the kitchen table sipping my coffee when the phone rang. I waited for the third ring. I picked it up. "Hello, Victoria," I said, my voice low and steady. "You old bastard!" she screamed so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "What have you done? You called the bank, didn't you? You told them lies. My father is being investigated by the feds because of you. You reported him for tax evasion or something, didn't you?" I looked at the torn pieces of the $50,000 invoice still sitting in the trash can. "I didn't have to lie, Victoria," I said. "The truth is usually enough to sink a man like Preston." "I am going to destroy you," she roared. "I am going to have you evicted from that pathetic little wooden shack. My father owns the deed to that entire block. He told me so. He is going to send the bulldozers tomorrow morning. You and Beatrice will be sleeping on the sidewalk by sunset. I will make sure you are eating out of a dumpster for real this time." I leaned back in my chair. I looked at the black ledger on the table. "The wooden shack," I said softly. "It is a nice house, Victoria. It has character. It has a foundation." I paused, letting the silence stretch between us. "But you should really be more concerned about your penthouse," I continued. "What are you talking about?" she snapped. "I did some reading last night, Victoria. Interesting stuff. That beautiful glass cage you live in, the one with the marble floors and the city view." "So what?" she said. "My father bought it for us. It is a wedding gift." "Actually," I said, clicking a key on my laptop. "According to the internal ledgers of Vance Shipping, that penthouse was purchased using $3 million from the Employee Pension Fund. It was listed as a warehouse renovation." Silence. The kind of silence that happens when the floor disappears. Victoria's breathing became ragged. How do you know that?" "I know everything, Victoria," I said. "I know about the North Sea accounts. I know about the fuel kickbacks. And I know that because those funds were stolen, the property is now subject to immediate asset seizure by the parent company." I looked at the clock. "In about 10 minutes there will be a knock at your door," I said. "It won't be the maid. It will be a team of marshals with an eviction notice and a locksmith. You have 15 minutes to pack a bag. Anything you don't carry out stays with the property." "You are lying," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You are just an old man in a garden. You can't do this. Who are you?" I took a sip of my coffee. "I am the man who paid for your wedding dress, Victoria," I said. "And since you didn't like the food I served, I decided to take back the table." "Marcus," she gasped. "Who are you?" "Really?" I hung up the phone. I sat there in the quiet of my kitchen. The fear had finally reached her. She was starting to realize that the man she had mocked wasn't a victim. She was starting to realize that the janitor had the keys to the vault. I looked at the laptop screen. A new file had just finished downloading. Victoria's previous marriage. It was even better than I thought. She wasn't just a social climber. She was a predator. But she had made the mistake of trying to hunt a thorn. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was high in the sky. It was a beautiful day for a walk. Inside the bedroom, Beatrice was awake. She walked into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. "Is it over, Marcus?" she asked. "The audit is just beginning." "Beatrice," I said. I walked over and kissed her cheek. "But for today, let's go out. I hear there is a penthouse in Tribeca hitting the market. I think it would make a great community center for the kids in the neighborhood." Beatrice smiled. It was the first real smile I had seen in days. The Vance Empire was a sandcastle, and the tide was finally coming in. And I was the one who had invited the ocean. The sound of the porcelain teacup shattering on the kitchen floor was the loudest noise I had ever heard. It was louder than the cranes at the docks. It was louder than the roar of the ocean. I turned around just in time to see Beatrice swaying her eyes, fluttering her hand, reaching out for a counter that was too far away. I moved faster than a man my age should be able to move. I caught her before her head hit the hardwood, but her body felt light like a bird with broken wings. Her skin was gray, and her breathing was a ragged, terrifying whistle. I called the ambulance, my voice a low growl of controlled panic. I didn't give the name Marcus Thorne. I didn't want the sirens to alert the vultures yet. I gave the name Marcus Evans, just an old man with a sick wife. The emergency room at St. Jude's was a blur of fluorescent lights and the smell of antiseptic. But because I am who I am, even under an alias, the hospital director was alerted the moment my private insurance cleared the system. Within minutes, we weren't in a cramped cubicle behind a plastic curtain. We were moved to the penthouse wing, the VIP suites, where the floors are carpeted and the air is filtered. Beatrice lay in the bed, hooked up to a dozen monitors, their rhythmic beeping, the only thing keeping my heart from stopping. The doctor told me it was a hypertensive crisis. Her blood pressure had spiked so high her body simply shut down to protect itself. He told me it was stress. He told me she needed absolute quiet. He told me that one more shock could trigger a stroke that she might not come back from. I sat in the high-backed armchair by her bed for 6 hours. I didn't move. I didn't eat. I watched the drip of the IV bag. I thought about the wedding. I thought about the steak on the floor. I thought about the penthouse dinner where my wife was treated like a maid. My anger was no longer a fire. It was a cold, deep ocean, and the Vances were about to drown in it. Around 3 in the afternoon, the heavy mahogany door to the suite creaked open. I didn't have to look to know who it was. I could smell the cheap cologne of desperation and the sweat of a man whose world was falling apart. Jamal walked in. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His expensive silk shirt was wrinkled and his eyes were darting around the room like a trapped animal. He didn't walk to the bed. He didn't go to his mother and take her hand. He stood at the foot of the bed and looked at me. "Dad," he whispered. His voice was thin and shaky. I didn't answer. I didn't even look at him. I kept my eyes on Beatrice's pale face. "Dad." "Please," Jamal said, taking a step closer. "Everything is a mess. The feds are at the office. Preston has been taken in for questioning. Victoria is at the apartment screaming and throwing things because the marshals are tagging the furniture. They took my car, Dad. They towed it right off the street in front of everyone." I slowly turned my head. I looked at my son, my only son, the boy I had protected from the world, only to have him become the very thing I hated. "Is that why you are here, Jamal?" I asked. "To tell me about your car?" "No," he said, shaking his head. "I mean, yes, no. Look, Dad, I know you did this. I know you are the one who tipped off the auditors. Preston told me. He said you mentioned the 12%. Only someone on the inside would know that. I don't know how you got that information, but you have to stop it. You have to call them and tell them it was a mistake." I stood up. I moved slowly, my joints aching but my spirit focused. I walked toward him and he flinched. He actually flinched, as if he expected me to strike him. "Your mother is in that bed, Jamal," I said, pointing to Beatrice. "Her heart is struggling to keep her alive because of the stress you and that woman put on her. Did you even ask the doctor how she is doing?" Jamal glanced at Beatrice with a look of pure annoyance. "She is fine, Dad. She is always having spells when things get tough. It is her way of getting attention. You know how she is. She is just trying to make me feel guilty for choosing Victoria. It is a classic move." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The lack of empathy was breathtaking. He wasn't just selfish. He was hollow. "I need you to listen to me," Jamal said, stepping forward, his voice getting louder. "The lawyers say the only way out for me is if I can prove that the money Preston gave me for the apartment was a legitimate personal loan and not a kickback from the pension fund. They need a witness to sign a backdated affidavit saying they saw the cash exchange and heard the terms. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled legal document. I need Mom to sign this, he said, shoving the paper toward me. It says she was there. It says she saw Preston hand me the check as a wedding gift. If she signs it, the feds will leave me alone. They will think it is just family money. Please, Dad, wake her up. Tell her she has to sign this. If she doesn't, I am going to jail for money laundering. Do you want your son to go to jail? I looked at the paper. I looked at the lies written on it in black and white. He wanted his mother, who was currently drifting in and out of consciousness, to commit perjury to save his skin. He wanted her to lie for the man who had humiliated her. She is sedated, Jamal, I said, my voice trembling with a rage I could barely contain. She cannot sign anything. And even if she could, I would never let her touch that filth. Then you sign it, Jamal shouted. His face was turning red. You were there too. Just sign it. It is just a signature, Dad. It is a piece of paper. If you don't do this, Victoria is going to leave me. She said she won't stay with a man who is under indictment. My life is on the line here. I looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes, and it wasn't the fear of losing his mother. It was the fear of losing his status, the fear of being a nobody again, the fear of having to work for a living. Preston Vance is a thief, Jamal, I said. And you helped him. You watched him steal from the men I used to work with. You watched him take the retirement money of honest people to buy a view of the park. You are not a victim. You are an accomplice. Fine, Jamal spat, throwing the paper onto the floor. Be that way. Be the self-righteous old dock worker. But don't you see? Mom is just playing you. Look at her. She is just lying there waiting for us to leave so she can get up and have a sandwich. She is faking it, Dad. She has been faking her weakness her whole life to keep you under her thumb and to make me look like the bad guy. Tell her to get up. Tell her the game is over. He walked to the side of the bed. He reached out as if to shake her shoulder. Wake up, Mom, he yelled. Stop pretending. I need that signature. I didn't think. I didn't plan. The 40 years of lifting crates, the years of holding back my strength, the years of being the quiet man in the background, all of it vanished. I moved. My hand came up in a blur. It wasn't a closed fist. It was a wide-open palm, the hand of a father who had reached the absolute end of his patience. The slap echoed through the sterile room like a gunshot. The force of it spun Jamal around. He hit the floor hard, his hand flying to his cheek. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Jamal stared up at me, his eyes wide with shock. He had never seen me like this. He had never seen the chairman. Get out, I said. My voice was a low vibration that seemed to shake the very walls. It wasn't a shout. It was a decree. Dad, Jamal whispered, his voice cracking. You hit me. I took a step toward him and he scrambled backward on the floor, his expensive shoes slipping on the polished linoleum. Your mother is fighting for her life, I said, my voice like cold iron. And you came here to ask her to lie for a criminal. You called her a liar. You called her a fake. You stood in her room and you thought only of your bank account. I pointed to the door. You are no son of mine, Jamal. Not today, not ever. You chose your side. You chose the Vances. You chose the money. Now go find out if that money can hold your hand when you are sick. Go find out if Victoria will visit you in a cell. But Dad, I have nowhere to go, Jamal cried. They locked the penthouse. I don't have a car. I don't have a cent. Then walk, I said. Walk until your feet bleed. Maybe then you will understand the value of the shoes your mother bought you. I walked to the door and opened it wide. 2 security guards in black suits were already standing there, their faces grim. They didn't ask questions. They knew who I was. Escort him out, I said. And if he ever sets foot in this hospital again, arrest him for trespassing. The guards grabbed Jamal by the arms. He struggled for a second, but they were younger and stronger. They dragged him down the hallway, his cries echoing off the white walls. I am your son, he screamed. You can't do this. I am a thorn. I watched him go until the elevator doors swallowed him whole. Then I closed the door and locked it. I walked back to Beatrice's bed. I sat down and took her hand. It was warm now. The monitors were steady. I leaned down and whispered into her ear, It is done, Beatrice. The trash has been taken out. Rest now. When you wake up, the world will be clean again. I stayed there in the quiet room, the billionaire in the cheap suit watching over the woman who was worth more than all the gold in the world. The purge was in full effect and I was just getting started. Tomorrow I would deal with Preston. But tonight I was just a husband, and that was more than enough. The silence in the hospital corridor was so heavy it felt like it had weight. It was the kind of silence that usually comes right before a building collapses or a heart stops beating. I stood there watching Preston Vance. He had backed away from the door of Beatrice's room, his face drained of every drop of color. He looked like a man who had seen a ghost. But it was worse than that. He was looking at the man he had spent weeks mocking, and he was finally seeing the predator behind the mask. Preston's hands were shaking so violently that the gold watch on his wrist rattled against his skin. He looked down at the check he had dropped on the floor, then back at the name on the medical chart. Beatrice Thorne. He kept shaking his head over and over again, as if he could physically shake the reality out of his mind. "No," he whispered. His voice was thin and brittle like dry leaves. "This is a mistake. I checked the human resources files personally when Jamal was hired. I looked at your background check, Marcus. Your name is Marcus Washington. You are a retired longshoreman from the Boston docks. You have a mortgage on a house worth less than my car. You are Marcus Washington." I took a slow step toward him. I didn't need to shout. I didn't even need to raise my voice. The power I had spent decades building was radiating out of me now. I wasn't the old man in the gardening gloves anymore. I was the mountain. "Washington is my middle name, Preston," I said. "My mother's maiden name. It is the name I used when I wanted to be just a man. When I wanted to see if I could build a life that wasn't defined by the billions in my bank account. I wanted to sit on my porch and watch the sunset without people asking me for favors or fearing my shadow. I wanted a quiet life with my wife. I stopped just inches from him. He had to look up to meet my eyes. He looked small. He looked like a child caught stealing from the church plate. "I gave you a kingdom to manage." "Preston," I continued, "I gave you Vance Shipping and told you to run it with integrity. I stayed in the shadows because I thought I had chosen a man who understood the value of hard work. I thought you were a leader, but you weren't. You were just a thief in a silk suit. And the worst part is, you weren't even a good thief. You were sloppy. You were arrogant, and you thought that because I wore an old jacket, I didn't have the eyes to see what you were doing." Preston stumbled back, hitting the wall. "But the North Sea accounts," he stammered. "The auditors. How could you trigger a federal investigation into your own company? You are destroying your own assets." I smiled. It was a cold, dark smile. "I am not destroying the assets, Preston. I am cauterizing a wound. You were the infection. You and your daughter and the culture of greed you brought into my son's life. I don't care about the money. I can make $75 million back in a week. What I couldn't make back was the dignity you tried to steal from Beatrice. You made her eat off the floor. You made her feel like she was nothing." Preston's eyes darted toward the exit. He was looking for a way out. He was looking for a miracle. "Sir," he said, his voice cracking into a sob, "Mr. Thorne, I am sorry. I didn't know. If I had known who you were, I never would have treated you that way. Please, we can fix this. I will return the money. I will apologize to your wife on my knees. Just stop the auditors. Call off the police. Don't ruin me. Think of your son. Think of Victoria. They are family now." I looked at him with pure disgust. "You only care because you know I am the one holding the leash," I said. "If I were still just Marcus the dock worker, you would be calling security to have me thrown out. Your apology isn't for your actions. It is for your bad luck." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I didn't use the secure line this time. I used the speed dial for the head of my personal security team. "Arthur," I said when the line connected. "Yes, sir. Mr. Vance is currently in the VIP wing of St. Jude's. He has attempted to flee the jurisdiction. I want him detained. And call Detective Miller. Tell him the evidence for the North Sea embezzlement is ready for pickup. Tell him the suspect is right here. No." Preston screamed. He turned and tried to run down the hallway. He didn't get far. 2 men in dark suits stepped out from the stairwell. They weren't hospital staff. They were my people. They had been waiting in the shadows since I arrived. They caught Preston by the arms and held him firmly. He struggled, kicking and shouting, his expensive shoes scuffing the polished floor. "Let go of me!" he yelled. "Do you know who I am?" I walked past him toward the elevators. "They know exactly who you are, Preston," I said without looking back. "You are a former employee." I took the elevator down to the lobby. I knew Jamal and Victoria were down there. They had followed Preston to the hospital hoping for a settlement, hoping for a way to save their lifestyle. When the doors opened, the lobby was crowded. People were going about their business, families were waiting for news, doctors were rushing to appointments. And there in the center of the room were Jamal and Victoria. Victoria was pacing back and forth, her designer heels clicking loudly on the marble. She was clutching her pearls, looking around like she was too good for the air she was breathing. Jamal was sitting on a bench, his head in his hands, looking like a man who had lost his soul and was just now realizing he didn't have a receipt. Then the side doors opened. The police arrived. 6 officers in uniform and 2 detectives in plain clothes. They marched across the lobby with a purpose that silenced the room. Victoria saw them first. She straightened up, a smug smile crossing her face. Finally, she said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Jamal, look. The police are here. Your father is finally going to get what he deserves. He must have done something truly illegal to have this many cops show up." Jamal looked up. He saw the police. And then he saw me. I was standing near the information desk. I had taken off my old jacket. I was standing tall, my presence filling the lobby. The lead detective, a man named Rodriguez, walked straight to me. "Mr. Thorne," he said, nodding respectfully, "we received the files. Thank you for your cooperation. We have the warrant." I nodded. "The suspect is being brought down now, detective." Jamal stood up, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. "Mr. Thorne," he whispered. "Detective, what is going on? Why are you calling my father Mr. Thorne?" Victoria laughed. It was a shrill, ugly sound. "Jamal, don't be stupid. The cop probably just got his names mixed up." "Hey, officer," she yelled, pointing at me. "That man is a dock worker. He is a fraud. My father is the one who called you." Detective Rodriguez didn't even look at her. He looked at Jamal. "Son, I think you should step back," he said. At that moment, the service elevator opened. My security team walked out, holding Preston Vance by the arms. Preston looked broken. His nose was still bandaged, his suit was disheveled, and he was weeping openly. Daddy, Victoria screamed, running toward him. "What are they doing to you? Why are they holding you like that?" Preston looked at his daughter, his eyes full of terror. "Victoria, shut up," he hissed. "Just shut up." Detective Rodriguez stepped forward. "Preston Vance, you are under arrest for grand larceny, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit fraud. You have the right to remain silent." The handcuffs clicked. The sound echoed through the lobby like a gavel. Victoria froze. She looked at her father in chains. Then she looked at the police. Then she looked at me. The realization started to crawl across her face like a slow-moving stain. She looked at my posture. She looked at the way the police treated me with reverence. She looked at the expensive watch I had forgotten to take off my wrist. "You," she whispered. I walked over to them. I stood in front of my son. Jamal was trembling, his mouth hanging open. He looked at the handcuffs on his father-in-law. He looked at the ruins of the life he had chosen. "Dad," he stammered, I don't understand. I know you don't." "Jamal," I said, my voice full of a sadness that went deeper than anger. "You never understood. You thought power was a title on a door. You thought wealth was a car you didn't own. You thought your mother's love was something you could trade for a view of the park." I turned to Victoria. "The penthouse is being locked down as we speak," I said. "The marshals are there now. Anything you didn't bring with you this morning is gone. The cars are being towed. The bank accounts are closed. You can't do this!" Victoria shrieked, her voice echoing off the marble walls. "I am a Vance. I have rights. I will sue you for everything you have." I looked at her with pity. "Victoria," I said, "I am everything you have. Or rather, I was. Now you have nothing but the truth. And the truth is, you married a man for a fortune that belonged to the father you despised." I looked at Jamal. "You wanted to be a man of the world, Jamal. You wanted to know what it felt like to be at the top. Well, this is the top. It is cold. It is lonely. And it is very, very quiet when the money stops talking." I turned to the detective. "Take him away." The police led Preston Vance out through the glass doors. The cameras of the local news crews who had been tipped off were already flashing outside. The fall of the Vance empire was going to be the lead story on every channel. Victoria screamed one last time before running after her father, pushing through the crowd like a madwoman. Jamal stayed behind. He stood in the center of the lobby surrounded by strangers. He looked at me pleadingly, his eyes red with tears. "Dad, please," he whispered. "I made a mistake. I can fix it. I will come home. I will help Mom." I looked at my son. I saw the little boy who used to hold my hand on the docks, but that boy was gone. He had been buried under layers of greed and cowardice. "The house is closed to you, Jamal," I said. "The locks have been changed. You chose your family. Now go be with them." I turned my back on him. I walked back toward the elevators. I had a wife to take care of. I had a company to clean up, and I had a legacy to protect. Not a legacy of gold or glass towers, but a legacy of honor. The Thorn name would mean something again. And as the elevator doors closed on the image of my son standing alone in the lobby, I knew that the purge was finally complete. The trash had been taken out. And for the first time in a long time, I could finally breathe. The chaos in the hospital lobby was a symphony of falling masks. I stood there as a silent witness while the world that Preston Vance had built out of lies and stolen money began to crumble into dust. The sound of the handcuffs clicking onto his wrists was the only music I needed to hear. But the real show was not Preston's arrest. The real show was Victoria. In that moment, I saw the true nature of the woman my son had chosen to be his life partner. She didn't cry for her father. She didn't reach out to comfort him as the police led him toward the glass doors. Instead, she took 2 steps back as if Preston's failure was a disease she could catch. She looked at him with a cold, clinical disgust that made my blood run cold. Preston looked back at her, his eyes pleading for a word of comfort or a promise to call a lawyer. But Victoria's face was a stone. She was already calculating. She was already surviving. As the police led Preston out into the rain and the flashing lights of the news cameras, Victoria turned her gaze toward Jamal. My son was standing there like a man who had just watched his house burn down. He was shaking his mouth, hanging open in a silent scream of confusion. He reached out to her, his hand trembling as he tried to find some anchor in the storm. "Victoria," he whispered, "what do we do? We have to call someone. We have to find a way to help your father." Victoria didn't take his hand. She slapped it away. She looked at him like he was a piece of garbage she had accidentally stepped on. Her voice when she spoke was loud enough for every officer and every witness in that lobby to hear. It was clear, it was sharp, and it was a blade aimed straight at Jamal's throat. "Don't touch me, Jamal," she screamed. Her voice echoed off the marble walls like a gunshot. "Get your hands off me, you pathetic loser. I can't believe I ever married into this family." Jamal froze. "What are you talking about, Victoria? I didn't do anything. You did everything," she roared. She turned toward Detective Rodriguez, who was still standing nearby making notes in his ledger. "Detective, you need to listen to me. I had no idea what my father was doing. I was an innocent bystander. It was Jamal. He was the one who pushed for those offshore accounts. He was the one who kept telling my father that the North Sea project needed more capital. He used his family's history on the docks to find people who could move the money quietly. He manipulated my father. He took advantage of a man who just wanted to see his daughter happy." Jamal's eyes went wide. He stumbled back as if she had punched him in the chest. "Victoria, what are you saying? I didn't even know the accounts existed. I am in marketing. You know that. You were the one who told me we needed the penthouse. You were the one who told me to ask your father for the bonuses." "Liar," Victoria shrieked. She looked at the police officers, pointing a manicured finger at my son. "He is trying to save himself. He knew everything. He forced my father into this. He threatened to go to the board of Thorn Logistics if my father didn't give him a vice president title. He is the mastermind. I am just a victim of his greed." I watched as the police moved in. They didn't arrest Jamal yet, but they surrounded him. They saw a young man who was clearly agitated and a beautiful woman who was playing the part of the grieving, betrayed wife to perfection. Victoria knew exactly what she was doing. She was shedding her old life like a snake shedding skin. She was throwing Jamal under the bus to buy herself a few more days of freedom. She was a predator who had found a bigger predator, and she was offering up my son as a sacrifice. Jamal was weeping now. It was a pathetic sound. "Victoria, please," he begged. "Tell them the truth. Tell them we were in this together. Tell them you loved me." "Love," she sneered. "I never loved you, Jamal. I loved the idea of what your family could be. But look at you. You are just the son of a janitor and a cleaning lady. You are nothing. You are a stain. And I am done being dirty." She turned her back on him and walked toward the exit, her head held high, as if she were the one who had been wronged. She didn't look back. She told, not once. She walked out into the rain, leaving Jamal alone in the center of the lobby, surrounded by police and the judgmental stares of 100 strangers. I didn't stay to watch the rest. I took the elevator back up to the VIP wing. I walked into Beatrice's room and sat by her bed. She was still sleeping, the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor the only sound in the quiet suite. I took her hand and felt the warmth of her skin. I thought about the 40 years we had spent building a life together. We didn't have much in the beginning, but we had loyalty. We had trust. We had a love that didn't require a credit card or a penthouse to prove itself. An hour later, my personal phone buzzed in my pocket. I knew who it was before I even looked. I pulled it out and saw Jamal's name on the screen. He was calling from the police station. They had taken him in for questioning based on Victoria's statement. He was alone. He was scared. And he was finally realizing that the world he had sacrificed his parents for didn't exist. I answered the phone. "Dad," he screamed. His voice was a high-pitched wail of pure terror. "Dad, you have to help me. I am at the precinct. They are asking me about money laundering. They are asking about the North Sea project. They think I am the one who started it all. Victoria." "Dad," she told them everything was my fault. She lied to them. She told them I forced Preston to steal the money. She is turning everyone against me. She is trying to send me to prison to save herself. I didn't say a word. I sat in the darkened hospital room watching the moon through the window. "Dad, are you there?" Jamal cried. "Please. I know you have the lawyers. I know you have the power. Call the district attorney. Tell them she is lying. Tell them I am innocent. I will do anything. I will come home. I will apologize to Mom. I will be the son you always wanted. Just get me out of here. Please. I can't stay in this cell. It smells like urine and metal. I am scared, Dad. I am so scared." I listened to him breathe. I listened to the panic in his voice. I listened to the way he still called me Dad when he needed something, but had called me a ghost when he thought he was a king. I remained silent. I counted the seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The silence on the line was absolute. Jamal's breathing hitched. He realized I wasn't going to speak. He realized the mountain wasn't going to move. "Dad," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Say something. Please." I took a deep breath. I looked at Beatrice's pale face in the moonlight. "That is the woman you chose, Jamal," I said. My voice was low, but it carried the weight of every tear my wife had shed since the wedding. "You stood on that balcony and told me that love doesn't pay for a penthouse," I continued. "You told me that Preston Vance was your future. You told me that your mother and I were just weights pulling you down. You chose Victoria. You chose the luxury. You chose the lies. But she is lying." "Dad," Jamal sobbed. "I know she is lying," I said. "But she is the woman you wanted. She is the woman you defended while your mother was being treated like a dog. You wanted to be part of that world, Jamal. You wanted to be one of the people who matter. Well, this is what that world looks like. This is the loyalty of the Vances. This is the love you thought was worth more than ours." I stood up and walked toward the window. "Enjoy it, Jamal," I said. "Enjoy the life you built for yourself. You traded a mother's heart for a snake's kiss. Don't be surprised when you feel the venom." "Dad, please," he screamed. "Don't hang up. Don't leave me here." I didn't answer him. I didn't have anything left to say. I pressed the button on the phone and the screen went black. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel satisfied. I just felt a deep, hollow emptiness. I had spent my whole life trying to give my son everything, and in the end, I had given him enough power to destroy himself. I walked back to the bed and sat down. I took Beatrice's hand again. The storm outside was finally fading, but the silence in the room was heavier than ever. My son was in a cell, and the woman he loved was busy sharpening the knife for his back. The purge was almost over. The trash had been taken out, but the house felt very empty. I leaned my head back and closed my eyes, waiting for the morning to come. The quiet life was over, and the billionaire in the old suit was finally alone with the truth. The skyscraper stood in the heart of the financial district like a pillar of black glass and steel. It was the headquarters of Thorn Logistics, a monument to 40 years of sweat and strategy. For a decade I had avoided this place. I had walked past it in my old work boots, looking up at the summit and smiling because I knew that even in my silence I was the soul of that building. But today the silence was over. The shadow chairman was stepping into the light. I stood in the back of the black SUV looking at my reflection in a small silver mirror. My skin was dark and weathered by time, but my eyes were sharp as a hawk. Arthur had brought the suit from the high-security vault at the estate, a charcoal gray Tom Ford three-piece. It was hand-stitched with silk lining and fit me like a second skin. I adjusted the silver cufflinks, the ones Beatrice had given me on our 25th anniversary. My hands were still the hands of a dock worker, thick and scarred, but as I straightened my tie, they looked like the hands of a man who could move markets with a whisper. I stepped out of the car. The morning air was crisp and smelled of rain and exhaust. I didn't slouch. I didn't limp. I walked toward the revolving glass doors with a stride that made the pavement feel small. As I entered the lobby, the security team froze. They had seen the memos, they had heard the whispers, but seeing me in the flesh was something else entirely. I didn't stop for a badge, I didn't wait for an escort. I walked straight to the private elevator bank. The doors opened to the 50th floor. The boardroom was a cavern of mahogany and glass occupied by 20 of the most powerful investors in the country. They were arguing. They were shouting. They were terrified. The news of Preston Vance's arrest had sent the stock price into a tailspin. They thought the ship was sinking. They thought the Thorn legacy was a hollow shell. I pushed the heavy double doors open. The sound was like a thunderclap in the panicked room. The shouting stopped. 20 heads turned. They saw a man they didn't recognize, yet they felt the weight of my presence. I walked to the head of the long oval table, the seat that had remained empty for 10 years. I pulled the chair back and sat down. I didn't say a word. I just looked at them one by one. "Who are you?" one of the younger board members asked, his voice shaking. "I am the man who paid for that chair you are sitting in," I said. My voice was a low rumble like stones grinding together. "I am Marcus Thorn." The room didn't just go quiet, it became a vacuum. These people had lived off my dividends for a decade. They had prayed to a name they never saw. And now the name had a face. "We have a lot to discuss," I said, leaning forward, "and very little time." I signaled to Sarah, who was standing by the large projector screen. She clicked a remote and the screen flickered to life. "Preston Vance is in a cell," I said. But he didn't act alone. He had help. He had a team of executives who watched him drain the pension fund and said nothing because they were too busy catching the crumbs that fell from his table. I pulled out a list. It was a list of every director and manager who had signed off on Preston's shell company transfers. "You are all fired," I said. "No severances, no bonuses, no handshakes. Security is already clearing out your desks. If you have personal items, you can collect them from the lobby in a cardboard box." The room erupted in protests. "You can't do this," one man shouted. "I have a contract." "Your contract has a morality clause," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "And helping a thief steal from retired dock workers is the definition of immoral. Get out." I watched them leave. They shuffled out like ghosts, their arrogance stripped away. But I wasn't finished. There was one more piece of trash that needed to be removed. I looked at the doorway. Victoria Vance was standing there. She had managed to talk her way past the downstairs security, probably using her father's old clearance before it was fully revoked. She was wearing a black dress and a string of pearls, looking for all the world like a mourning widow. She thought she could still charm the board. She thought she could still find a way to save herself. "Marcus," she said, her voice soft and sweet, "I am so glad you are here. My father, he's been set up. It's all a mistake. And Jamal, poor Jamal is so confused. He told me you were helping him." I didn't answer her. I just looked at Sarah. "Show the other file," I said. The screen changed. It wasn't corporate ledgers anymore. It was a digital trail of fire. "For the last 3 years, Victoria," I said, my voice cold and hard as iron, "you have been using a corporate black card issued to your father for emergency operations. You used it to buy 4 Hermes Birkin bags. You used it for a week-long party in the French Riviera that cost $300,000. You used it for jewelry, for private jets, and for a lifestyle you didn't earn." Photos of her at lavish parties flashed on the screen, receipts for caviar and vintage champagne. And the most damning piece of evidence of all, the wire transfers from the Vance shipping accounts directly to a boutique in Manhattan. This wasn't just greed, Victoria, I said. This was grand larceny. You were spending the retirement money of 3,000 families so you could have a bag that matches your shoes. Victoria's face went from sweet to feral in an instant. You can't prove that, she shrieked. My father gave me that card. It was a gift. It was a gift from a thief using someone else's money, I said, and the parent company is now suing you for the full return of those funds. I turned to the two men standing behind me. They weren't my security. They were federal marshals. Victoria Vance, I said as they stepped toward her, you are being indicted for receiving stolen property and wire fraud. The marshals moved in. Victoria tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. She shrieked as the handcuffs clicked shut over her thin wrists. She looked at me, her eyes full of a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. You ruined everything, she screamed. You are just a filthy old man. You should have stayed in your shack. I stood up. I walked toward her until I was standing right in her face. I could smell the panic on her. The shack is mine, Victoria, I whispered. I built it with my own hands. But your penthouse is gone. Your cars are gone. Your pearls are being tagged as evidence. When you get out of prison, you won't even have a sidewalk to call your own. I leaned in closer. I hope that steak was worth it, I said. She was dragged out of the room, kicking and screaming. Her heels skidded on the floor, the same heels she had used to stomp on my wife's dignity. I turned back to the remaining board members. They were staring at me with a mixture of fear and reverence. The audit is ongoing, I said. We are going to find every penny Preston stole, and we are going to put it back into the pension fund. We are going to rebuild the trust of our workers, and we are going to do it with integrity. One of the investors cleared his throat. Mr. Thorne, what about the stock price? It's crashing. The price only crashes when people think there is no one at the helm, I said, sitting back down in the chairman's chair. I am at the helm now, I said, and I am not going anywhere. I looked out the window at the skyline. The sun was high and the city looked bright. The trash was gone. The air was clear. And for the first time in 10 years, the Thorne name stood for something more than just money. It stood for justice. The purge was over. Now the building began. I looked at the empty seats around the table. They represented the vacuum left by greed. I realized then that my son was right about one thing: the world is indeed a cold place. But he was wrong about why. It isn't cold because of a lack of money. It is cold because of a lack of humanity. I thought about Beatrice back in the hospital. She was the one who had kept my soul warm while I lived in the shadows. She was the reason I had fought so hard to keep the Thorne name clean. I reached into my pocket and felt the small, smooth stone I always carried. A reminder of the docks. A reminder of where I came from. Gentlemen, I said to the board, I want a press release issued within the hour. State that the company is under new management. Effective immediately, all executive bonuses are suspended and the funds are being diverted to the employee health plan. The room was silent. No one dared to argue. They saw the fire in my eyes, and they knew that the dock worker had returned to claim his kingdom. I walked out of the boardroom, leaving them to their numbers. I had a wife to see. I had a family to heal. And as I stepped into the elevator, I realized that the greatest victory wasn't the arrest or the money. It was the fact that I could finally look in the mirror and see the man my mother had raised. A man of honor. A man named Thorne. The elevator doors closed and I descended toward the lobby, leaving the ghosts of the Vance legacy behind me in the dust. The sun was shining on the street below, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt completely and utterly free. I sat on the porch of our small wooden house as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and deep orange. The air was still, and the neighborhood was quiet, except for the distant sound of a lawnmower and the chirping of crickets in the tall grass. My hands were resting on my knees, the skin wrinkled and scarred, a map of every hard day I had ever worked. Inside the house, Beatrice was resting. She had come home from the hospital that morning, her strength returning slowly, but her heart still heavy with a grief that no medicine could fix. I had spent the day making her tea and making sure the pillows were just right, but my eyes kept drifting toward the street. I knew he would come. A man like Jamal has nowhere else to go once the mirrors of his vanity are shattered. A yellow taxi pulled up to the curb. It was a battered old car with a dented fender, a far cry from the red convertible and the silver Bentley that used to announce his arrival. The passenger door opened slowly and Jamal stepped out. He looked like a stranger. The sharp designer suit he had worn to the penthouse dinner was gone, replaced by a cheap, rumpled shirt and jeans he must have bought at a gas station. His hair was messy, and the arrogance that used to radiate from him had been replaced by a hollow, desperate exhaustion. He stood by the taxi for a moment, staring at the house as if he were trying to remember if he still belonged here. He paid the driver with a few crumpled bills, and the taxi sped away, leaving him alone on the quiet street. He walked up the gravel driveway, his footsteps heavy and uneven. He didn't look like a vice president. He didn't look like a man of the world. He looked like a boy who had played with fire and was just now realizing that the burns were permanent. He reached the bottom of the porch steps and stopped. He looked up at me sitting in the shadows of the eaves. "Dad," he whispered. His voice was cracked and thin, barely audible over the evening breeze. I didn't move. I didn't say a word. I just watched him. "I got out," he said, taking a step up the first stair. "The lawyers said since I didn't sign the primary documents for the North Sea accounts, they couldn't hold me. They let me out on bail this afternoon. But Dad, everything is gone." The marshals took the keys to the penthouse. They towed the car. "Victoria, she's gone, Dad. She took the last of the cash we had in the safe and she disappeared. She told the police I was the mastermind. She told them I forced her father into the embezzlement. She betrayed me, Dad. She lied to me for months. She never loved me. She just used me to get closer to the Thorn money." He reached the top of the stairs and fell to his knees on the wooden planks. The old floorboards creaked under his weight, a familiar sound that used to mean welcome. He grabbed the hem of my trousers, his hands shaking. "I was wrong, Dad," he sobbed, his forehead touching the dusty wood. "I was so wrong. She tricked me. She made me believe that I was special, that I was better than everyone else. She turned me against you and Mom. I didn't see it happening. I was blinded by the lights and the luxury. Please, Dad, I have nowhere else to go. I haven't eaten since yesterday. I don't have a cent to my name. Let me come inside. Let me see Mom. I want to tell her I'm sorry." I looked down at the top of his head. I thought about the boy I had carried on my shoulders through this very yard. I thought about the pride I felt when he graduated from college. And then I thought about Beatrice sitting on that metal bench in the supermarket crying because her own son had flagged her card as stolen. I thought about the hospital room and the way he had yelled at his unconscious mother to wake up and sign a lie to save his skin. I stood up slowly. I reached down and gently but firmly removed his hands from my legs. I walked to the front door and opened it. Jamal's eyes lit up with a flicker of hope. He thought I was letting him in. He started to stand up, reaching for the doorframe. "Stay right there," I said. My voice was low, but it carried the authority of the mountain. I reached inside the entryway and picked up an old blue gym bag. It was a bag from his high school days, dusty and worn with a broken zipper. I had packed it that morning while Beatrice was napping. I stepped back out onto the porch and looked at him. "You say she tricked you, Jamal," I said. "You say you were blinded. You want to blame Victoria. You want to bring your failures to this door and leave them at the feet of the people you discarded. But she did lie," Dad, Jamal cried. "She is a criminal. Victoria is exactly what she appeared to be." "Jamal," I said, "she was a shark, and sharks do what sharks do. They bite. But you weren't a shark. You were a son. You were a man who knew the difference between right and wrong. You knew what your mother had sacrificed for you. You saw the sauce on her dress and the tears in her eyes, and you chose to look at your watch instead." I held the blue bag out in front of me. "You told me love doesn't pay for a penthouse," I continued. "You told me that my values were hand-me-downs that didn't fit your new life. You wanted to be a Vance. You wanted the power and the glass and the cold metal of the city. Well, you got it, Jamal. You got exactly what you asked for. You got the reality of a world where people are only worth what they can provide." I tossed the bag at his feet. It hit the porch with a dull thud. "Inside that bag are your old clothes from the attic," I said. "The clothes you wore when you were still a man of character. And in the side pocket you will find $500 in cash." Jamal looked at the bag, then back at me, his eyes wide with horror. $500, he whispered. "Dad, that won't even cover a hotel for a week." "That is all you are ever going to receive from me, Jamal," I said. Not another dime, not another word. I worked 40 years to build a legacy for my family, but I didn't build it for a coward. I raised you to be a man who protects his mother, not a man who sells her out to keep a corner office. Dad, please, he screamed, grabbing the bag and clutching it to his chest. Don't do this. I am your son. I am a thorn. No, I said, you are a Vance in a thorn suit, and the suit is being repossessed. I looked him dead in the eye, and for the first time in his life he saw the absolute finality of my soul. He saw that the father he thought was soft was made of the same iron as the ships on the docks. Go find a job, Jamal, I said. Go work with your hands. Go see if the world cares about your Ivy League degree when you have no money in your pocket. Maybe after 5 years of sweat and hunger you will remember the taste of the bread your mother used to bake for you. But until then, do not come to this house. Do not call this phone. As far as I am concerned, the man who stood on that balcony in Tribeca died that night. But Mom, Jamal wailed. Let me talk to Mom. Your mother is resting, I said. And for the first time in months she is breathing without fear. I will not let you take that away from her again. You have done enough damage. I stepped back into the house. I took hold of the heavy oak door. Goodbye, Jamal, I said. Dad! No, he screamed, lunging for the door. I slammed the door shut. The sound was absolute. It echoed through the small house like the closing of a tomb. I turned the deadbolt, and the click was a period at the end of a long, painful sentence. I stood there with my back against the wood listening to him. I heard him pounding on the door with his fists. I heard him screaming my name. I heard him begging for Beatrice. I closed my eyes and leaned my head back. I felt a tear roll down my cheek, but I didn't wipe it away. It was a tear for the boy he used to be. The man outside was a stranger, and a stranger has no place in my home. Slowly the pounding stopped. I heard him sob one last time, a broken, hollow sound. Then I heard the gravel crunch as he walked down the driveway. He was walking. He had no car. He had no destination. He just had a blue bag and $500 and the crushing weight of his own choices. I walked into the kitchen and sat down. I picked up Beatrice's cold cup of tea and took a sip. It was bitter. Marcus, a soft voice called from the hallway. I looked up. Beatrice was standing there wrapped in her robe. She looked at the door, then at me. She didn't have to ask. She knew. Is he gone? She asked. He's gone. Beatrice, I said. She came over and sat next to me. She put her head on my shoulder and I put my arm around her. We sat there in the quiet of our little wooden house watching the stars come out. The Thorn name was still ours. The honor was still intact. We were poor in the eyes of the world, but we were rich in the things that mattered. And as the night settled over us, I realized that the hardest thing a father can do is let his son fall, but sometimes the only way to teach a man how to stand is to let him feel the hard, cold ground beneath his feet. The park was quiet that morning except for the distant sound of a playground and the rustle of golden oak leaves dancing across the pavement. It was the place where Beatrice always went to find her peace. For decades she had walked these paths when the world felt too loud or when the weight of my secrets felt too heavy for her to carry. Now that the truth was out and the Vance empire had been dismantled, she walked with a different kind of stride. Her head was held high, and the navy blue coat she wore looked like a suit of armor. I was sitting in my truck at the edge of the parking lot watching her from a distance. I always watched her now. I had spent too many years letting her be a target for people like Victoria and Preston. Never again. Beatrice was sitting on her favorite green bench near the duck pond when a shadow fell across her. It wasn't the shadow of a tree. It was the shadow of a ghost. Victoria Vance stood there. But she didn't look like a Vance anymore. Gone were the designer dresses and the $500 manicures. Her hair was greasy and pulled back in a messy knot. She was wearing a cheap nylon tracksuit that was 2 sizes too big, and her eyes were sunken and red from days of crying, or perhaps just from the sheer exhaustion of being a nobody. She looked like the very people she used to mock at the wedding. She looked like a woman who had finally realized that without a bank account, she didn't have a personality. Beatrice didn't move. She didn't gasp. She just looked at the water. Mother Beatrice, Victoria whispered. Her voice was thin and brittle, a far cry from the screeching command she used to use in the penthouse. Beatrice didn't look up. "I am not your mother, Victoria," she said. Her voice was as calm as the pond. "Please," Victoria sobbed, dropping to her knees on the dirty concrete. "You have to listen to me. I have nothing." They locked the apartment. They took my jewelry. I am staying in a motel that smells like cigarettes and mold. I have to walk everywhere because the cars were seized. Jamal won't even talk to me. He blames me for everything. But I was just a daughter trying to please her father. You know what that is like, Beatrice. You are a good person. You are a Christian woman. You can't let me starve in the street." Beatrice slowly turned her head. She looked at Victoria kneeling in the dirt. She looked at the woman who had dumped steak at her feet and told her to eat it like an animal. "You had every opportunity to be a human being," Victoria Beatrice said. "You had wealth and education and a family that welcomed you. But you chose to be a predator. You chose to use your mouth to tear people down instead of building them up. Why should I help you? Because of the baby." Victoria gasped, clutching her stomach. Beatrice froze. "I'm pregnant," Victoria lied. The words came out in a rush, desperate and frantic. "I'm carrying Jamal's child." "Jamal's?" "I'm carrying your first grandchild, Beatrice. You can't let your own flesh and blood grow up in a motel. You can't let a Thorn baby be born into poverty. Think of the child. If you won't help me for my sake, do it for the baby. Do it for the legacy Marcus cares so much about. Please talk to him. Tell him to give me back the house. Tell him to let me come home." I saw Beatrice's shoulders tense. I saw her hand go to her purse. For a moment I was worried. Beatrice has a heart made of gold, and I thought Victoria had found the one weakness left in her. I started to open the truck door, ready to intervene, but then Beatrice did something I didn't expect. She didn't cry. She didn't reach out to Victoria. She pulled her cell phone out of her purse. Victoria's eyes lit up with a sick, triumphant spark. She thought she had won. She thought the pregnancy lie was the ultimate trump card. She started to stand up, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. "Thank you, Beatrice," she whispered. "I knew you were a saint. I knew you wouldn't let a child suffer." Beatrice didn't look at her. She was scrolling through her contacts. She found a number and pressed call. She put the phone on speaker. "Hello," came a deep, professional voice. "Dr. Sterling's office. How can I help you?" "Hello? Dr. Sterling?" Beatrice said, her voice loud and clear in the quiet park. "This is Beatrice Thorne." "Mrs. Thorne," the doctor said, his tone instantly turning respectful. "It is so good to hear from you. How are you feeling after your stay at St. Jude's?" "I am feeling much better," Dr. Beatrice said. "I am calling because I need to verify some information for our family records. My husband Marcus mentioned that our insurance was used for a procedure for a family member recently, a woman named Victoria Vance." Victoria's face went from pale to gray. She tried to reach for the phone, but Beatrice pulled it back, her eyes flashing with a cold fire I had never seen before. "Ah, yes," the doctor said. "I have the records right here. Mr. Thorne's private investigator requested a medical audit of all dependents last week. Victoria Vance underwent a surgical procedure 14 days ago." Beatrice looked directly at Victoria, who was now shaking so hard she could barely stand. "What was the procedure?" Dr. Beatrice asked. According to the bill submitted to the Thorne Trust, the doctor said it was a high-definition liposuction and body contouring surgery. It was elective and cosmetic. And Dr. Beatrice asked, her voice like a knife, "Was there any mention of a pregnancy in her blood work or her preoperative exams?" "No," the doctor said firmly. "In fact, the patient had to sign a waiver confirming she was not pregnant before the anesthesia was administered. The results were negative." "Is there anything else, Mrs. Thorne?" "No, doctor," Beatrice said. "That is all I needed. Thank you." She hung up the phone. The silence that followed was absolute. The only sound was the wind and the distant ducks. Victoria was frozen, her hands still clutching her stomach. The lie was dead. It was stripped naked in the middle of the park. Beatrice stood up. She looked taller than I had ever seen her. She looked like the wife of a billionaire. She looked like a woman who had finally realized she didn't have to be a victim. "You went for a fat removal surgery 10 days after my son's wedding," Beatrice said, her voice dripping with a quiet, righteous fury. "You spent money stolen from retired dock workers to tuck your tummy while you were telling my son we were a burden on his future." Beatrice took a step toward her. Victoria cowered back, almost falling into the duck pond. "You are a hollow woman, Victoria," Beatrice said. "There is no baby. There is no love in you. There is only greed. You thought I was soft. You thought I was a fool because I stayed quiet while you insulted me. You thought I was a doormat you could walk on forever." Beatrice leaned in close, her face inches from Victoria's. "But you forgot one thing," Beatrice whispered. "I am a thorn now, and we don't handle trash, we remove it." Beatrice reached into her purse one last time. She pulled out a $10 bill. She crumbled it into a ball and threw it at Victoria's feet. "That is for the cab ride to the bus station," Beatrice said. Victoria looked at the $10, then up at Beatrice. "Mother, please," she begged. "Don't you ever call me mother," Beatrice snapped. "My children have honor. My children have souls. And as for your parents, don't bother looking for them at their estate. They are in a cell where they belong. You should go visit them. I hear the prison food is served on trays, not on the floor. Maybe they can teach you how to eat it." Beatrice turned her back. She didn't look back. Not once. She walked toward the parking lot where I was waiting. Victoria began to scream. It was a high-pitched, animalistic wail of pure desperation. She screamed insults. She screamed please. She threw the $10 bill into the water. She sat on the pavement and pounded her fists against the ground like a toddler. She was a broken, spoiled child, and the world had finally stopped listening to her tantrums. Beatrice reached the truck. I opened the door for her. She climbed in and buckled her seatbelt. She looked at me, and for the first time in weeks, the sadness was gone from her eyes. "Are you okay?" I asked, taking her hand. "I am more than okay." "Marcus," she said. She looked out the window at the park. "I am free," she whispered. I started the engine and we drove away, leaving Victoria Vance screaming at the ducks in a park she used to think was beneath her. The sun was shining on the dashboard, and as we headed home, I realized that my wife didn't need me to protect her anymore. She had found her own strength. She had found her own voice. And heaven help anyone who ever tried to make her eat off the floor again. The ride home was peaceful. We talked about the garden. We talked about the future. We talked about everything except the son we had lost and the daughter-in-law we had discarded. The Thorn name was clean. The debt was paid. And as I looked at Beatrice, I knew that the greatest payoff of all wasn't the money or the power. It was seeing the woman I loved stand up and realize she was a queen. The legacy we built was finally safe. And as the park disappeared in the rearview mirror, I knew that the Vances were finally exactly where they belonged. In the past. True nobility isn't about the title on your door or the balance in your bank account. It's about the courage to look a monster in the eye and refuse to be its victim. Richard and Victoria thought they could consume our lives because they had more gold, but they found out that iron is forged in the fire of integrity. I spent my life in the shadows to see if my family could stand the light. My son failed the test, but my wife became the brightest star in the sky. Everything else is just dust. 6 months have passed since the walls of the Vance Empire came crashing down. The winter snow has settled over the city of Boston, covering the streets in a layer of white that feels like a clean slate. I am Marcus Thorn, and at 71 years old, I have finally learned that the true measure of a man's life is not the height of the skyscrapers he builds, but the depth of the roots he leaves behind. Beatrice and I still live in our small wooden house. We did not move to a penthouse. We did not buy a fleet of luxury cars. The only thing that has changed is the garden. It is dormant now, sleeping under the frost, but the foundation is stronger than ever. The legal battles were long and bloody. Preston Vance is currently serving a 15-year sentence for grand larceny and pension fraud. His daughter Victoria fared no better. The evidence of her wire fraud was undeniable, and she was sentenced to 5 years in a federal facility. The penthouse was seized. The Birkin bags were auctioned off. The silver Bentley was sold to pay back the dock workers she had indirectly robbed. Every penny we recovered from the Vance accounts went into a very specific fund. We called it the Beatrice Thorn Legacy Foundation. It is a scholarship program designed for the children of the longshoremen and the warehouse workers. The children of the people Preston called the Help. This morning the city is hosting a gala to honor the foundation's first year of work. I am standing in our bedroom watching Beatrice adjust her pearls in the mirror. She is wearing a simple, elegant black dress. She looks like a queen. Her health has returned, and the gray tint has left her skin. There is a peace in her eyes that I haven't seen since we were 20 years old. She caught my reflection in the mirror and smiled. "Are you ready, Marcus?" she asked. "I am always ready when I am with you," I said. While we were preparing for the gala, 40 blocks away in a different part of the city, the world looked very different. Jamal was standing in a cramped, greasy kitchen of a small diner called the Greasy Spoon. It is located near the very docks where I spent 40 years of my life. The air was thick with the smell of old frying oil and dish soap. Jamal was wearing a stained apron and a cheap hairnet. His hands, once soft and manicured, were now red and raw from 18-hour shifts in the dish pit. He was scrubbing a blackened pot with a steel wool pad, his muscles aching in a way he had never known. He looked at the clock. It was nearly noon. He had been on his feet since 4 a.m. He was living in a 12-by-12 studio apartment with a leaky ceiling and a radiator that only hissed. He had no car, he had no silk shirts, he had $5 in his pocket and a heavy heart in his chest. One of the other cooks, a man who had actually worked with me years ago, pointed to the small flickering television mounted in the corner of the break room. "Hey kid, turn that up," the cook said. "That is the guy everyone is talking about. The billionaire who used to be a docker." Jamal stopped scrubbing. He wiped his brow with a greasy sleeve and looked at the screen. The news anchor was standing in front of the grand ballroom. "Today we celebrate a historic gift to the city," the anchor said. "Marcus and Beatrice Thorne have donated $50 million to establish a permanent education trust for the families of laborers. This is the largest individual act of philanthropy in the history of the port." The camera cut to a live feed of the gala. Jamal froze. He saw me. I was walking across the stage wearing the charcoal gray Tom Ford suit. I looked powerful. I looked invincible. And then he saw Beatrice. She was walking beside me, her hand in mine. She looked radiant. The news anchor continued talking about the Thorne legacy, about the honor of the family, and the way we had protected the workers. Jamal felt a lump in his throat that felt like a stone. He watched his mother smile at the crowd. He watched her receive a standing ovation from the very senators and CEOs he had been so desperate to impress. He saw the respect in their eyes. He saw the dignity that he had tried to throw away for a view of the park. A single tear rolled down Jamal's cheek, leaving a clean trail through the soot on his face. He remembered the balcony in Tribeca. He remembered telling me that love doesn't pay for a penthouse. He remembered telling me that I was a ghost. He looked at his raw hands and then back at the screen. He realized that the man on the television wasn't just a billionaire. He was a father he had betrayed, a father who had tried to show him that the only seat at the table that matters is the one you earn with your soul. "I am sorry," he whispered to the empty kitchen, but the dishwasher was humming too loud for anyone to hear him. The TV screen flickered as the mayor introduced us to the podium. Back at the gala, I stood behind the microphone. The room was filled with the elite of the city. They were all leaning forward, waiting for me to speak. I looked out at the crowd, and for a moment I didn't see the suits and the diamonds. I saw the faces of the men I used to work with. I saw the future of their children. Beatrice stood next to me, holding my hand. Her grip was firm. Mr. Thorne, the mayor, said, his voice booming, "This is a proud day for your family. Your son must be very proud of the legacy you are building for him." The room went silent. Everyone knew about the scandal. Everyone knew about Jamal's fall. They wanted to see how the lion would react. I leaned into the microphone. I looked at the cameras, knowing that my voice was carrying across the entire city. I knew Jamal was watching. I wanted him to hear this. "I don't have a son," I said. My voice was calm and steady like the deep ocean. The crowd gasped. A few people looked at each other in shock. "I have a son who chose a path of greed," I continued. "I have a son who chose to look away when his mother was being humiliated. I have a son who believed that a name could be bought with stolen money. That man is not here today." I looked at the young students sitting in the front row, the first recipients of the scholarship. They were black and white and brown, and their eyes were full of dreams. "We have no son," I repeated, looking at Beatrice, "but we have these children. We have the thousands of young men and women who will go to college because of this foundation. We have the future of this city. They are our family now. They are the ones who will carry the Thorne name with the integrity it deserves." I squeezed Beatrice's hand. "Legacy is not about who shares your blood," I said. "It is about who shares your values. We are investing in character. We are investing in the truth." The room erupted in applause. People stood up cheering. Beatrice looked at me, and I saw a single tear of pride in her eye. We had done it. We had turned the pain into a purpose. We had taken the trash of the Vance legacy and turned it into the gold of the Thorne future. As we walked off the stage, I felt a sense of completion. The cycle was closed. The lesson was taught. I thought about Jamal in that greasy kitchen. I hoped he was listening. I hoped he was learning that the hardest work a man ever does is not with his hands, but with his heart. I am Marcus Thorne. I am 71 years old. I have billions in the bank, but my greatest asset is the woman standing beside me and the knowledge that I never let the world change who I was. True nobility is not found in the silk you wear or the car you drive. It is found in the quiet moments when you choose what is right over what is easy. It is found in the courage to stand up for the people who raised you. The Vances built a house of glass, and it shattered. We built a house of iron, and it will stand forever. In the end, the only thing you truly own is your name. Make sure it is a name worth remembering. We walked out of the gala and into the cool winter afternoon. The city looked beautiful. The snow was falling again, covering the scars of the past. I put my arm around Beatrice, and we headed home to our little wooden house. The work was done. The fire was lit. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly at peace. Would you like me to write an epilogue detailing Jamal's journey toward redemption, or the first day of the scholarship students? It is a quiet Tuesday afternoon, and the late summer sun is casting long, honey-colored shadows across my backyard. The air smells of charcoal and seasoned hickory, and the distant sound of a lawnmower from 3 houses down provides the only soundtrack to my peace. I am standing at the grill wearing an old apron that Beatrice bought me for my 60th birthday. I am flipping ribs and checking the char on the corn. I am 71 years old, and for the first time in my entire life, I am not watching my back. I am not checking the stock tickers or looking for the next hostile takeover. I am just a man cooking dinner for his wife. Beatrice is sitting in the porch swing a few feet away. She has a book in her lap, but she is not reading. She is watching the birds at the feeder I hung last week. She looks beautiful. The grayness that had settled into her skin during those weeks of trauma has vanished. Her eyes are bright, and the gentle movement of the swing is the only rhythm she needs. We could live in a mansion with a gilded gate and a staff of 20. We could be sitting on a terrace in the south of France or on a private island in the Caribbean. I have the money to buy any of those things 10 times over. But we are here. In the small wooden house with the creaky floorboards in the 1980s kitchen. We stay here because these walls remember who we were before the world knew my name. These walls remember the nights we shared a single sandwich so we could save for Jamal's college fund. This house is the foundation of our dignity, and you don't walk away from your foundation just because you can afford a fancier roof. I look at the smoke rising from the grill, and I think about the last 6 months. People often say that money changes you, but they are wrong. Money doesn't change people, it unmasks them. It is a spotlight that shines on the cracks in a person's soul. For Preston Vance and his daughter Victoria, money was a camouflage. They used it to hide the rot inside them. They thought that as long as they had a designer label on their chest and a high balance in their bank, they were superior. They used their wealth as a weapon to silence the poor and a ladder to climb over the honest. But when I took that money away, they didn't just lose their status, they lost their identity. Without the gold, they were nothing but empty shells. I used my money differently. I used it as a shield. I used it to protect the kindness that Beatrice has spent her life giving to the world. I used it to ensure that 3,000 families who work on the docks will never have to worry about their retirement being stolen by a man in a silk suit. Wealth is a responsibility, and if you aren't using it to make the world a little more just, then you are just a well-dressed thief. The silence of the afternoon is broken by the familiar chime of the doorbell. I wipe my hands on my apron and walk through the house. I look through the small window in the front door. There is no one there. Just a simple white envelope tucked under the brass knocker. I open the door and pick it up. There is no return address, but I recognize the handwriting immediately. It is slanted and a bit messy, a remnant of the boy who used to rush through his homework so he could go play basketball. It is from Jamal. I walk back to the porch and sit on the step. I carefully tear open the envelope. There is no request for money. There is no mention of the $500 I gave him or the blue gym bag. There is no begging for a job at the logistics firm or a plea to help him with his legal fees. It is a single page of notebook paper. Dear Dad and Mom. The letter begins. I am writing this from a small room in a boarding house near the shipyards. I got a job moving crates in a warehouse. It is hard work and my back hurts every night, but for the first time in years I can look at myself in the mirror. I saw the news about the scholarship fund. I saw Mom on the stage. I cried for an hour because I realized that the woman I told to eat off the floor is the greatest woman I will ever know. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I am finally learning what it means to be a thorn. I am learning that a man's worth isn't in his title, but in the calluses on his hands and the truth in his heart. I love you both. I read the letter twice. I feel a slight sting in my eyes, but I don't let the tears fall. I look at Beatrice. She is watching me, her eyes questioning. "Is it him?" she asks softly. I nod. "What does he want, Marcus?" "He doesn't want anything, Beatrice," I say. "He just wanted to say he is sorry. He is working at a warehouse." Beatrice looks toward the street. A flicker of motherly instinct crosses her face, a desire to run to him to bring him home to feed him. But then she remembers the supermarket. She remembers the hospital. She looks back at her book. "Is he okay?" she asks. "He is learning," I say. I fold the letter carefully. I walk into the house and go to my small desk in the study. I open the top drawer and place the letter inside a small wooden box where I keep the photos of our wedding and the first dollar I ever earned. I click the drawer shut. Beatrice stands in the doorway. "Are you going to call him?" she asks. I look at the closed drawer. "Not yet," I say. "Not today." "Why Marcus?" "Because he has only been a man for a few months," I say. "He spent 28 years being a shadow. He needs to find out who he is when the lights are off. He needs to learn how to stand on his own 2 feet without a family name to carry him. I want him to be my son again, but first, I need him to be a human being. Let him work, Beatrice. Let him learn to be a man. When the calluses on his heart match the ones on his hands, then we will open the door." I walk over and put my arm around her. We walk back out to the garden. The ribs are ready. The world is at peace. The thorn legacy is not the money or the buildings. It is the strength to do what is right even when it breaks your own heart. True power isn't about shouting the loudest or sitting in the biggest chair. It's about the quiet strength to protect those you love when the world tries to break them. The Vance family thought dignity was something you could buy with a credit card, but they learned the hard way that respect is a currency earned only through character. My wife ate off the floor that day not because she was weak, but because her love for her son was greater than her pride. But a mother's love is a shield, not a doormat, and when you step on it, don't be surprised when the ground beneath you crumbles. In the end, you can fire an employee, but you can't fire the consequences of your own arrogance. Thank you for following the journey of Marcus and Beatrice Thorne. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of the power of integrity, please let us know in the comments. Have you ever had to stand up to family to protect your own worth? Hit the like button and subscribe for more stories about justice being served and the strength of the human spirit. What would you have done if you were in Marcus's shoes? Would you have forgiven Jamal sooner, or did he get the lesson he deserved? We would love to hear your thoughts below.